I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where we have birthed this project that brings us a whirl of emotions.
Not always joy. I know what this is. The podcast where we did everything we thought we wanted and nobody made us do this and we did it anyway. And we thought it was going to be so fun. And yet we complain and complain and complain. And people go, are they just spoiled brats or is there something chemically wrong with them? And we find out together.
And we find out together. That was a really good one, Claire.
Thank you. I've learned from the best.
Claire, where are you going April 4th, 10th, 11th, 24th, May 1st, May 16th, May 18th, and June 14th?
I believe in order: Toronto, Chicago, Philly, DC, San Francisco, London, Dublin, and New York City.
That's a lot of travel. Is it for any reason?
Yeah. I'm obsessed with celebrity memoirs, okay? I've got it in my mind to find out which memoirist is the memoiriest memoirist. And I'm going to pit them head to head in a March Madness style tournament where I go city to city and compete them until I find the best one.
Can other people come?
Oh, we'd hope so, because we can only get to this decision through democratic voting. And the only way to vote is to scream loudly in a theater.
Well, that sounds pretty exciting. And so I think if I were someone who wasn't going to be on stage, I'd be buying tickets right now.
Oh, tickets are where?
Oh, they're in the show notes. They're on our Instagram. They're on our website. If you Google Celebrity Memoir Book Club and the name of the city, you'll find it up there. And we hope to find you around town.
That would be the stuff.
That's the stuff.
Anyway, Ashley.
Yes, Claire?
If you were journaling, what would you journal about this week?
Oh my God.
You brought something?
Yeah, something happened to me last night that I didn't tell you about yet.
You saved it for... Wow, you guys. I can't believe she prioritized you over me. She doesn't even know you, and I'm her husband. The wedge.
Speaking of my husband. Okay, so last night, I sometimes go read at like a bar or somewhere. There's
a couple. Because I was with you last night until 8 p.m. I can't believe something happened to you between 8 p.m. and this morning.
Well, I went to a place to go read. I decided to get myself a little vegetable patty sandwich. That's what I call a veggie burger.
Where'd you go?
I went to a place called Mother's. It's like a bar by my house.
Okay.
And
I've been there.
Don't dox me. Okay, so anyway, so I went to this bar because it's pretty well lit and they have a sandwich that I like. And so I went there, I'm reading my book, cranking through the pages, having a sip of a Diet Cola.
Oh, this sounds good.
Knocking back fries. I get up to leave and someone from the bar, a guy, comes and drops a note on my table.
Did it say, will you go out with me? Yes or no? Circle one and report back.
Okay, so in my mind, it would have been like a phone number.
Okay.
So I just tucked
I'm so nervous that's neither of the things we just said.
No, it like kind of is. So I tucked it into my book all aloof like, and I like walked home and then I got home and I like opened the note. And then it was like questions. Flirtatiously.
I will say this is on you.
I know. Well,
you never take the note to a second location.
Can I say, in my defense, I wasn't particularly attracted to him.
Okay, so you were kind of like you win some, you lose some.
I was kind of like, if it had been a number, I would have like decided what to do with it over the next day or two. But because it was like, what book are you reading? Do you live around here? I don't want to like write on this piece of paper, I'm reading The Motherload by Sarah Hoover, but it's like for my podcast. I don't actually like...
It doesn't reflect my interest.
This isn't like the book I would be reading if I was like here reading flirtatiously, trying to like attract men. You know what I mean? It's not like indicative of who I am. It's indicative of what I do. It was just like a series of questions where I was like, okay, I get that this didn't pan out the exact way it would have panned out in my fantasies.
But we're getting close.
But I did walk away being like, we are so back, baby. And that's a fun note to start the summer on. February 27th.
The summer starts when the first note is passed. It's the groundhog of sex.
I felt cool about it.
I love that. I like that.
And that's what I would be journaling about right now if I was journaling in a book instead of with my mouth.
Oh, and if only you hadn't journaled, you had written on the notepad. It's okay. Pen to paper.
Pen to paper, I think we're fine. I will say his handwriting was damn near illegible. I like sat there. I was like, what are you asking me? And the question was like, what book are you reading? And I was like, these are short words. Anyway.
The problem with reading a book in public is when people ask you about it and you have to be like, I actually didn't come here to read for you. This wasn't an invitation. This is my job. I'm at job right now.
I will say I'm reading here because I read at home, I feel like it's easier for me to check my phone more.
Yeah.
And I need to be in public accountable for how much I'm looking at my phone.
I love that.
Claire, what would you be writing about this week?
I would write a question and it'd be to God. And I'd say, what did I do to you? What did I ever do to you?
Oh, not another plague. You've been plagued?
Yeah. I know that I'm not the first woman in history to live through a winter. And I know I'm not the first woman in history to get her period. But I have a question.
Why is it worse for you?
Why am I getting my period in the winter? And how come no one else? Why only me? What did I do? Why am I suffering like this? I feel so ugly. It's so bad in my life right now. I can't fight. I don't know what to do. I hope to God you're not watching this on YouTube. Get out of here. I don't even want the AdSense. I want privacy in my time of need.
My eyes.
I really have been like, I don't even know God. How did I offend him?
I will say, I don't think you look bad. But I will say, last week, I was having a week where I was in a similar position.
Similar, but not as bad. Nobody's lived through what I'm living through.
Yeah, no, so true. I don't know. Sometimes your blood's pumping every which way and your eyeballs get blurry and your face turns into like a different face shape to yourself. Like
I'm like, how is blood only going to my acne? Like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, how is all of me so sallow and like empty and like blah and like lifeless? But then the pimples feel pumping. And do you know, I'm like, oh, don't give them more white blood cells. Cut off the oxygen. Next week, I have a vacation.
I'm excited for you.
And I really think when I come back, if I'm not beautiful, chemicals will get involved.
Yeah.
I'm taking acid to the dome.
That's a good idea.
I'm burning it down to the stump and I'm regrowing what I can.
That's smart.
Yeah. Talking to you has been fun. That's cheered me up.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God, because we talk a lot. Should we get into this week's book?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one is not a celebrity memoir. It's like a influencer, New York City society memoir.
This is the kind of woman who she herself does not have a lot of Instagram followers, but everyone who follows her does, if that makes sense.
I want to say up top, this author seems like the type to seek out responses to her book.
You feel like she's going to be in our DMs or in our comment section?
No, I think we're going to be in her ears. And I want to say to you directly right now, if you're listening,
Sarah,
I liked this book.
Sarah,
don't listen. Stop. I enjoyed it. I think my overall feeling is well done.
Yeah.
I got a lot to say.
Ashley's cup of tea.
I got a lot to say. And I don't want to say it to your face.
It's interesting. I think we both of us saw in her like our worst case scenario personal foils.
Yeah. So if you're still listening, what you just heard, that's not nice. And
I think we both were like, there's a version of my life where I ended up in a hell that is her shoes. And yet I think ironic. And the irony, of course, is that she has a life that seems quite glamorous and that some people might think, oh, you could be so lucky. How does she get to have that kind of life? And me and Ashley think, if things had gone wrong, that could have been me. If everything went so bad.
She is like the perfect version of the worst thing that could have happened to either of us melded into one person.
She's a real be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for because you could be a published author.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also living my hell.
But she gets to be friends with Emrata. What could be more important than that? Imagine getting to be the person who does the first pass at Emrata's new book. How lucky. How privileged.
Oh, the greatest literary minds in one room.
And you could take a photo next to her where you kind of have to be blurred a little bit and always a bit behind her so that the proportions look like you're kind of similarly sized.
I will say, should I ever get to know Emrata, do not photograph me next to her. I want to be like Carol Radswell and Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, two best friends never photographed on the same plane.
Amen.
So this book begins
Los Angeles, August 2018. And you know how these guys go. We're going to start in a crazy scenario. And then you're going to say, record scratch. How did I get here?
And where is she? She's at the Chateau Marmont throwing a sexy baby party.
She calls it a baby shower, but the baby's 10 months old. And she is doing drugs. The theme of the party is
drugs.
Yeah, drugs.
Drugs and babies.
The invite said no gifts unless it's drugs.
Very cool.
And she's got a bungalow and she's smoking ciggies. And she's like, my body isn't what it used to be, even though I've looked at Instagrams.
It's pretty damn
tight.
close.
It's pretty tight. She's got her long blonde hair professionally blown out. She's inviting whoever she met at the store that day. The nanny's taking care of the baby in the bungalow, and she's having a wild ride.
She's in LA on like a 1 month kind of stopover just to get out of New York in the August time.
You know how everyone's like, ugh, nowhere's better than LA in August.
So she's spending the month in LA, and then her husband is going to come out to meet her, and they are going to go to Bali.
You okay, baby doll? Sharon, the nanny, asked. The baby now asleep over her shoulder. She always played the slot machines on her phone while he napped. Totally, I lied. I had to. Ever since I had this baby, I've been lying constantly, too fixated on being a good girl to care that I was also being a bit of a con artist. But I couldn't tell her or anyone my ugly truth. So far, for me, motherhood had been an all-out fucking war. I felt nothing for this baby who'd come out of my body. I didn't want to change diapers and pretend I thought baby stuff was cute. I had no interest in sitting in mommy and me classes or play groups where the squishy whelps drooled and stared at one another while all the mommies acted like it was the most fun they'd ever had, gleefully proclaiming the magical love they felt for their offspring.
She decorates the tables for the party with crayons and cigarettes.
And she looks at her baby and she's like, I know what nobody will admit to me, which is that my baby is a fucking ugly demon.
My baby felt like a stranger to me, and I was gearing up for an afternoon of faking it. This is one of the tough things about this book is she is very honest and like raw about postpartum depression and this feeling she has. She has one, not a feeling of connection to her baby. Mm-hmm. Two, she is petrified something is going to happen to her baby, and she like lives in a constant state of fear that if she even tells anyone about her fears that will bring them to life. Every night in my dreams, I watch the baby die. Night after night, I'd be jolted from sleep by some gruesome scene or another. He'd be shot by snipers, thrown into the train tracks, burned in a house fire, or even dropped in the pool. Like, she's constantly plagued by these really horrifying thoughts. Mm-hmm. The thing that it's hard to reconcile is like this with her belief of herself as like a good girl / art hoe. Like, I don't understand how that, you know what I mean? When she's like,
yes,
no one will believe I'm like the good little girl from Indiana. Anyway,
I was doing the lines of cocaine off my baby's forehead.
The theme of the party was drugs, crayons, cigarettes.
I think this book is self-aware enough for it to be good that she's kind of like, all this and I was still unhappy. That's how horrible motherhood is. And I kind of think there is this extension of like, if you have all the help in the world and you're still this almost suicidal, then it needs to get better for everyone.
Yes.
There are some things where I'm like, as honest as she was, there's a couple more points that I wish I could prod her on.
Yeah.
And they start here. It was this emotional landscape, this unscalable Everest of confused feelings and rocky desperation, this bottomless, agonizing worry about my child, but simultaneous inability to feel anything resembling love for him, this rage over my husband's seeming lack of accountability, this endless hatred of myself that set me up perfectly to go off the deep end in the weeks and months that followed. In my defense, birth and motherhood did not match up to the narrative I'd been fed, and it felt like a nasty trick. And while my mental breakdown was embarrassing at times, especially considering how it exposed me as a puerile and spoiled little fool, it also showed how pernicious it is to sell tales of motherhood being so distinctly wonderful and feminine, the very essence of womanhood. It wasn't all totally my fault, you know? I'd been misled. I think a lot has been done in the last 5 years, especially with like the rise of TikTok, which I think took it even out of the memoirs and out of the documentaries and like really can put it in the palm of your hand. I think a lot has been done to dispel this myth of motherhood being so easy and fun and perfect and beautiful, and like how hard it is and the physical pains and like the recovery and the hormones. There's been, I think, a lot of honesty. Enough honesty that I, a potential future mother, am almost like, you win. I won't do it. Are you happy? You got me. It looks disgusting.
All very scared now.
They're like, if someone had told me, and I'm like, don't tell me then, please. Because, okay. Anyway, that being said, I feel I've always been vaguely aware that motherhood is, quote unquote, the hardest job in the world. And I think there's a couple moments in this book where she's just like, nobody told me. Nobody told me. And I don't think that that could be true. I don't believe it's true. She's not that much older than us. We live in very similar environments. She claims that nobody told her motherhood was this hard. She claims nobody she knew talked about mental health or going to therapy or being on antidepressants. And I'm just like, you live in New York City in an art epicenter. Like, she is a gallerist married to an artist. I feel like every single day of my life, I'm hearing about people's SSRIs, their HPV, and their mental wellness. I feel that the context that she writes this book under, because I agree with Ashley, I found it very as they would say in the memoir biz, an unflinching look at the raw experience of motherhood. I do feel that she is still dishonest to herself. And one of those dishonesties is this idea that like, if only someone had told me, if only I had been allowed to feel my feel. I'm like, lady, that's not the world you're in. That's a choice you made. And we can dissect why.
Yes.
What the priorities you picked for yourself, what the rules you live your life by are. But do not tell me that you were living in goddamn Soho and you didn't know people were going to therapy.
Yeah. And so I think she does do a good job of kind of walking back and forth between the privilege. She does very unflinchingly showcase that there is a chemical imbalance here, and you can have all of the privilege and all of the access in the world and like still not be able to beat mental health. But there's this other thing happening here that is, I think, her version of herself, like her vision of herself, and like whether or not that's an honest depiction of who anyone in the world actually is. And that is separate to me.
So 2009, New York City. The first time Tom, her husband is artist Tom Sachs, who I'm actually quite excited to say my mom is coming on the Patreon this week to talk about him and his positioning in the art world.
Her response when asked was, sure, gross.
So we're excited to get into what kind of man this is. However, I think this memoir does it for you.
I hate him.
It's a real Busy Phillips vibe. In order to be a good artist, I have to be honest about how horrible my husband is. I hope this has no implications on my real life.
Hopefully your kids never learn to read.
The first time Tom called, I was at the gallery sitting at my wooden desk, which should be called the Long Row. She worked at Gagosian, for those of you who don't know, one of the top galleries in New York City, very prestigious. They handle all the most expensive art, big art, says Ashley. I'm sure Alicia Keys and Swizz Beat are in there often buying giant pieces of art.
Yeah. You know a place is good when it's known for the most expensive arts.
So she is an assistant there. She had moved to New York at 22. I guess she went to college. I think she went to NYU and studied art history. But she's here. She's 22 years old. And a famous artist, Tom Sachs, has called to ask about his Wikipedia page.
He needs an update on his Wikipedia page. He's represented by this gallery. She is a little bit flirtatious when they're talking about the updates that she can like write and propose and send over to him. And it ends in this like months long back and forth where they're like talking on the phone. It's a little bit flirty. And finally, she agrees to go on a date with him.
Her friends are all like, just like, let him take you out, let him take you out. She kind of is like, no, he couldn't possibly like me. But she does. She goes and meets them at Balthazar. And he ends up ordering one of everything and they chat and she's sassy and she can't believe her luck. It's that thing where she's like being bolder than she actually feels. And on the inside, she's like, oh no, I hope I didn't go too far.
I wasn't nervous. It sounds crazy, but the night already felt right. The hostess sat the two of us at a red leather booth large enough to accommodate 4 or 5 people, but it was just for me and Tom. She knew him by name and kissed both cheeks. They're drinking champagne, they're eating snacks, and then he forgets his wallet, which is like a whole situation.
She has to cover it with her like parents' emergency credit card. And she's like, look, was I a rich girl from a small town in Indiana? Yeah, I was. I did go to private school. My dad did help me with my rent. But still, that credit card was for emergencies. And going on a date with a man who bought one of everything is not really an emergency.
Honestly, the forgetting the wallet thing, I was like, I don't know, mistakes happen. It doesn't seem like he was trying to like steal snacks from her.
Yeah.
It felt whatever. For me, the first giant red flag is when the next day he sends a messenger with like...
He had taken home all of the leftovers, which there were a lot of because, again, they had gotten one of everything. And he had sent a messenger with all of the steaks.
He made them into sandwiches for her. And then with money, like cash to pay her back for the dinner.
Mm-hmm.
But he sent it to her office. And to me, this was a gigantic red flag because I do feel that it's one thing for an artist to be dating an assistant gallerist, which I think is already predatory enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think to be making a show at work is horrific.
You know, it's interesting. He sends her back the sandwiches in McDonald's wrapping because, and then when you look it up, like one of his big art pieces is he's always doing like art collabs with McDonald's that are not supported by McDonald's. They're like unaffiliated McDonald's art collabs.
You guys understand
he has a lot of
the artistic vision, the commentary on
he's
consumerism.
Capitalism? I've noticed some things up here.
Oh, when I think of excess consumerism, capitalism, supersize these thoughts.
You know what I don't like about the stuck-up art world? That they're so elitist. Nobody's looking at McDonald's. What if I made high art out of McDonald's?
I'm high looking at that art thinking that's good art.
So there is something funny about like using your own, like, could you imagine if I had gone on a date with a man 20 years my junior who was an absolute worm, a wormhead working at Vox, my network. And I went on a date with him, ordered one of everything and then said, you have to pay. And then the next day I sent him leftovers in like CMBC socks. I was like, hey, I took all the leftover French fries and I put them in pairs of my own merch.
It is egregious.
Yeah. I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to become a predator as soon as I become famous.
That's such a good idea, Claire. I'm really happy that we're partners.
Tell your friends to listen to this podcast so I can blow up and then immediately use all my success and fame to date 22-year-old boys. The ultimate prize. I love a guy that can't pay for dinner.
Okay, so they start dating. She loved how like passionate he was about his work. I found it inspirational and sort of hot that he had such passion. Maybe one day he'd have that sort of fervor for me. So she does say a handful of things in this book. Okay, I think a lot of it is either universal or like a very well-written thing that I personally can't relate to, but I think she's doing a good job of explaining like postpartum depression or something like that. She says certain things though where I'm like, fucking duh. Like a man who's passionate and you look at him and go, well, maybe someday he'll transfer that passion to me. Duh. You're not weird for this one, bitch.
She is somebody who wanted to move to New York City and her goal in life was to be in the middle of the culture. And like, I think a lot of people move to New York and they go, why do you live in New York? And you're like, I love to be amongst the theater and the ballet and the art. And then it's like, okay, when's the last time you went to an art gallery? And they're like, next week.
I'm amongst.
I could though. And that's what's important. Every time I pass a McDonald's, I go, in my brain, that's art.
Yeah.
And I live right by a McDonald's.
Yeah.
So
that's
I'm seeing a lot of art. I also live near a Taco Bell. And I don't think anyone's taken the critical eye to that thing yet, but I have. I've got ideas.
That's so interesting.
I'm going to do an installation of sauces and all the saucy sayings that come on the packets.
That's so fun. And then
brain blast. I'm going to take like philosopher quotes and put them on the Taco Bell sauces.
And then say, you've been Baja blasted.
TM, TM, TM. Trademark. Don't take that. That's my art. I'm going to Tokyo with it. I'm selling it for $1 million and then getting a 22-year-old boyfriend. That's my 10-year plan.
I really think it'll bring you happiness. I think that's the key to happiness.
And more than happiness, I think I'm going to bring a little bit of elucidation to the world where now they're going to be able to think a new way that they hadn't thought before.
Thank God, because right now the way we're thinking is so bad. It's because no one's having enough philosophized Baja Blast.
Slurp it up. But I guess I do want to say, like, she came from Indianapolis, I believe, maybe outside of it, whatever. And she was like, I want to be a part of the New York art scene. And to get a job at the top gallery, I'm like, how'd you get that job? Because that's a quite coveted position that, you know, all the Charlotte Yorks of the world would twist their panties up to get, you know, and then she immediately started dating one of their top artists. So she did it. She launched herself right into the epicenter of culture. And if you watched Girls or Sex and the City and that's what you wanted for yourself, over the next few weeks, Tom and I drove to New Jersey and went indoor skydiving. Then I took him to a nearby mall and ordered all my favorite junk food at a cheesecake factory.
Okay, can I say this is a really funny thing about their relationship to me? First of all, indoor skydiving, what the fuck? Second of all, the fact that like he's making all this high art about like lowbrow things and she's like,
he had never been to the Cheesecake Factory.
And I get this version of her. Like I feel like there is a Midwestern compulsion to like show people from cities like the joys of the way that I dream of taking you to the Wisconsin Dells someday.
I went on a date with a famous director once and he had never been on a bus. Have I ever told you the story? And then when we got off the bus,
he tried to tip the bus driver.
He tried to tip the bus driver.
And they were like, I will go to jail.
She kept being like, don't do it. And he kept being like, come on. And then she was like, it is illegal for me to accept tender. And I was just like, what is wrong? I was so humiliated by him. I was like, you are a loser for real.
So anyway, so this part all feels very relatable. It's all very understandable.
Can I read the next date, though, that he took her on? Because it's very Swizz Beatz and Alicia Keys.
Yeah.
One night after dinner, he took me to the big graveyard near JFK Airport. He led me to a crypt with the door cracked open. Inside, a cellist played Bach's Goldberg variations while a bartender made cocktails. I mean, That is like, if you went to NYU and studied art history, that's an insane date. Then they went to Philip Johnson's glass house for a small dinner, and Tom showed me through the archives, talking to me about the paintings. And then he found a chair he himself had made as a prototype. That was like a Frank Gehry prototype. I will say, if you are into this stuff, I cannot imagine this wouldn't like wow your socks off.
Of course. And then they're finally about to have sex for the first time. She gets her period and he is unflinching.
He said, I'll take your tampon out with my teeth. And she was like, intimacy. Now this is adult life.
And that's another, that is adult life. I feel like when you...
That is adult life?
No, not that. But I feel like when you're young, I feel like your body, you're like so ashamed of it and keeping it a secret. And I feel like the first time you have sex with someone who like...
doesn't care about your period, you're like, I'm allowed to not care. I've been ashamed since 7th grade.
Exactly.
No, it's true. And then she has a little dog that she had brought over, and she was kind of like boldly like, well, I'll sleep over, but my dog has to come. And it turns out her dog has a problem with like eating all of her tampons.
Okay, this is so gross, actually.
Is this so bugcore?
No. Oh my God, no.
So they're laying in bed naked, and then the dog walks up onto the bed and pukes up her bloody tampon on her chest.
This was disgusting.
But he's an artist. He loves that shit. It's very Miranda July all fours.
After that first night, we were just a couple. I had Chinese food with his parents. They took us to an off-Broadway play. He took Petunia, that's her best friend, out for pasta. One night before bed, propped up on opposite elbows facing each other, he told me that if I were a flower, I'd be an orchid. This was the kind of sickening romantic conversations we had sincerely while staring into each other's eyes in bed. He like sees her at work and stuff, and someone's being kind of bitchy to her, and he tells her, you're allowed to be more of a bitch, you know? Don't take that shit. It is crucial that she really views herself as like a nice girl from the Midwest. And he's saying like, you need to come out of your shell and like be bitchier.
Yeah. I believe there are parts of her relationship when they're alone in their bed and like during pillow talk and stuff, it seems like he really is excited by her ideas. And she's like, when I talk, he listens, he writes down what I say, like it's important. When he called her an orchid, he goes, you know, I believe you're going to bloom over and over again and have many different lives and many different variations of yourself. And he appreciates her input. And it seems like they do have this like lovely rapport where she feels heard and respected by him. However, out in public, the problem is that
is so close with all of his exes.
He told me it was important to him and that they were all good people whom he liked. I couldn't really argue with that, though glancing over as a text from a woman's name popped up sometimes tested the limits of my meager confidence. This woman wasn't an ex, but I knew we'd be seeing her at a party. She ends up having this kind of pattern where they're going out together, and there's always a woman that's coming over to him, kissing him on both cheeks, ignoring her, touching his arm. At one party, she goes, why'd you get dinner with Caroline last night? And he goes, oh, I just ran into her at the hotel. We just had dinner. That was all. Meanwhile, he had told Sarah the night before, oh, I can't hang out with you. I'm too busy with work. And she does not call him on it.
She just takes it because she feels that she is not like pretty enough to call him on his shit. The only point I could come up with that I had on any of them was my youth. Little demonic voices started up in my head. This would not happen to you if you were more beautiful, the main voice whispered. I felt my happiness drain out of me slowly, like I was bleeding to death from a tiny pinprick on the sole of my foot, barely noticeable, not even a trickle.
I can do this, I thought. I can tolerate little pains to be with this man that I absolutely worship. I can pretend I don't care. And I let him take my hand and lead me to dinner.
So she had never really considered having kids. Like she'd never been the person who dreams about being a mother someday.
Yeah, her future fantasies, I think, were very Sex and the City based. Very like, let's go to New York City and have this incredibly cultural, interesting dinner party lifestyle. And it was informed by the fact that her mother was a working mother and often showed disdain for stay-at-home moms.
And her children.
And motherhood itself. When I met Tom, I was 22, and we got married when I was a wee 28, which I have to say is one of the most annoying ages I've ever been. I was rife with insecurity, having no detailed vision for my future, no calling to fulfill or idea of who I really was.
This is something that I think is the most terrifying sentence in this book. I think that to commit your life to someone when you have no concept of who you are is really a bad idea.
I thought I knew so much about myself, and in retrospect, I knew almost nothing, of course. Now when I look back, I wonder if that's just the pattern of life that repeats ad nauseum until it's over. I felt so worldly and inexperienced for finding a mate, someone who loved me and believed in me, even if I was his junior.
And can I say one of the things that is especially scary about it is if the person you're marrying is someone who's 20 years older than you, and the thing you like about them is like how established in their life they are. Because one of the big problems in their relationship is that she fits herself into his life. He never really did anything to fit himself into her life. Because like what life?
The problem is they have this dynamic that is he's the genius artist and I'm the gallerist. And that's I'm his assistant at work and at home. I felt grateful to do it. I was surrounded by the kind of people I admired the most, smart and wildly inspired and dedicated to their work, and I was trusted to facilitate their creative dreams. What more could I have wanted? It seems like a lot of her life and even her conversation with her mom and her friends, everything kind of revolves around Tom, that he's like the great prize and anchor in her life. And she starts thinking about children, and she's surprised when her mom says something like, I think when you get to my age or even older, you'd be really lonely if you didn't have a baby. She sounded very serious, and I stopped scanning my emails to listen. I think you'd look at your whole life and you'd say to yourself, what did I do this all for? I'd stayed quiet for a beat, the gravity of her question weighing on me.
And then she gets back to her and Tom's relationship. He made room for me in his life, and he was generous, but his work always took precedence, and he didn't especially alter his behaviors from his pre-Sarah existence. I knew where I fell on the priority list, but when I spotted him texting a woman from his past, or I watched him smile big and make extra eye contact with some fabulous woman at a party while I was at the bar, it knocked my confidence in a different way, and I worried that if I said too much about his exes, if I complained in a way that made it hard for me to fit into his life, I'd fall to the wayside. I started to perceive our potential marriage as the proof that I needed that Tom really loved me, that he chose me, and that I was enough. I was going to get what I fucking wanted, even if it was just this one time. This was the moment where I said, surely they're divorced by now then, right? Because that's not what marriage is. A marriage is not like, for once, I want to do my thing.
That's what a baby is. You don't use a marriage to lock a man down. You use a baby to trap him forever. And oh, does she? No, she doesn't. But
I mean,
because you can't lock him down, you know?
I want to say to anyone out there who's thinking that they have to get married to prove to their boyfriend that they should be paying more attention to them, you should get a different boyfriend. This is a really bad idea. I'm very stressed for her. And then he says, I've always wanted kids. They're the greatest project a human can possibly create. In her mind, she's like, oh yeah, we'll get married and we'll have kids.
After we got married, I was still myself at work and out in the world, and I was still sort of accidentally in Tom's shadow at home. My blind adoration, the kind that had allowed me to embed myself in his life without asking that he'd do the same in return, did slowly fade over time. But our marriage certificate did nothing to quell my burgeoning resentment that his work was the most important thing in his life, more important than I ever would be. And while I loved my work and respected the art world and what I did within it, I would have given up everything for him at the drop of a hat. She also has his phone password, something he did not know, I think, until this book came out. And she begins this habit of whenever he's in the shower, she goes through all his DMs and his texts.
Oh, how cute.
I let my nosiness become an addiction I couldn't abandon the same way people pick their cuticles. I was constantly searching for ways he was disloyal to me. And she was finding them.
He was very flirty in texts and with women that he had been with previously, but she never said anything because the fear of rocking the boat chipped away at my courage. I felt I had no option but to stew silently. What was I going to do? Leave him? The problem is, like, they are not in a partnership. She is an admirer of his, and like he lets her admire back up close. She's right. You can't say anything if his answer is like, okay, then I guess we'll break up. Like, if you can't take whatever his answer is going to be, then you can't start the conversation.
Yeah. And the problem is, it does come back to like, if what you want more than anything is to like be in a world and you see somebody as your ticket to that world, if there's like a tertiary thing that you're trying to get to that your relationship allows you to be a part of, and I guess also it's like a self-worth thing. If you're like, well, I'm only valuable because of my association to him, then yeah, you're going to be in a shitty situation because what are your other options?
Yeah. And she is establishing herself in her own career more. She's not an assistant gallerist anymore. She's moved into an office. She's got a lot of short skirts. I think she's a name about town. At least the years that she's been on his side as a +1, I feel like she's kind of established herself in the echelon of New York society. Yeah, but she's managing artists now. Like, she's not,
But also outside of that, I think it's more than just her job. It's a lifestyle that she created that she had access to with him.
Yes.
She gets to go to the galas and the parties and Tokyo. And she's like, I mean, she lists all the things she does as his wife. And it's like, we're meeting this great philosopher at this ambassador's house and looking at this person's private Picasso. And then we're flying off to art fairs and then we're listening to private concerts. And then, you know what I mean? It's a world that she gets to be a part of because of him.
Exactly.
All I knew was that I loved Tom. Even if I was no longer totally in awe of him, even if he chose work over me, I was committed to him, both because of the time I'd invested in the potential I saw in our partnership.
So my rage is obviously building towards Tom because at first I was like, yeah, this is a thing she has decided upon. And I think that the flirting via DM is pretty obnoxious. But then they're at a dinner party and someone is like pretty mean to her face at the dinner table. And he just kind of laughs and dismisses it. Stand up for your fucking wife, bitch. She compares Sarah to a pretty ugly painting. Like he could just say, no, that's not what she looks like.
Or like, no way, you're way hotter.
Yeah.
Say, no, you're hot.
I don't know. Like letting someone call your wife ugly at the dinner table, that really upset me.
January 2017, New York. I texted my mom a photo of my positive pregnancy test while I sat on the toilet.
I think I was hoping that if he got really excited, it would push me to get really excited too. I stood there still naked, displaying a plastic wand, wanting his reaction to be over the top and romantic. Is this real? He asked, grinning, but not openly weeping. There were no shrieks of glee. He didn't sweep me off my feet and carry me to my bed. He just kind of is like, okay, cool. So the problem is she established this relationship as his admirer. And then I think she thought the marriage would like create more equality. And then I think she thought the baby would create more of a back and forth.
The inertia of a relationship will continue unless there's like a drastic attempt on both sides to fix it.
Yes.
There has to be at some point. Like, I think this hope that your famous older art husband will just one day wake up and be like, why don't I consider her more and work less? Why would he?
Yeah.
He married what he knew, which was a woman who said, don't ever think about me. I'll be there when you're free.
So Chelsea Fagan, the financial diet, made a TikTok recently talking about the if he wanted to, he would epidemic. The conversation of women saying if he wanted to, he would. And she said, it is true that if someone wants to step up for you, they will. But you have to tell them how, and you have to like set expectations. And then if he wants to do that, he will. And if he doesn't want to, he won't. And then you can say, oh, this is the person who like won't.
Because if you're going to have a long-term partner, no matter how great they are up front, like no matter how wonderful they are, there's eventually in your life going to be a time where you need something that they can't predict. And if you don't have the habit or the ability to vocalize that, your needs will go unmet. So what's like more important than anything is just establishing like a relationship where you're allowed to say, oh, this is what I want. And you practice saying this is what you want so that you can know it.
And if you explicitly
and then see
believe
if they respond,
your relationship will fall apart if you say what you want, then like this is why you cannot marry a person you start dating at 22 if you are not like a very mature 22-year-old.
Or a 22-year-old who's like growing and changing and adapting.
Yeah. So they go to their first appointment and they get a sonogram. My eyes just started making droplets and they dribble out without sound or warning.
It's so sweet that you're so excited, the doctor said to me, pulling out the probe. Get dressed and come find me in my office. I wiped my face with the tissue she gave me and then wiped all the gel off my inside my legs. I didn't know why I was crying, but it wasn't happiness or excitement. I didn't think. I hadn't winced or frowned nor felt my face crumble. My eyes had just started making droplets and they dribble out.
So then they go to the doctor's office for like a conversation and the doctor says you're due in October. So starting July, you can't travel.
And then Tom starts weeping.
And he goes, so I can't go to Spain in August? And she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? We have no plans to go to Spain in August.
He's like, but if we wanted to, we couldn't. And the doctor's like, well, you could if you want her to give birth in a Spanish hospital with Spanish-speaking doctors and then have to be stuck in Spain for a month after. And he's just like, but Ibiza. What if Ibiza comes calling?
She has a pretty tough pregnancy. She has really horrible morning sickness.
I cried openly at my next doctor's appointment. My quality of life is absolutely zero, I told her, watching the little growing fetus twitch on the screen. I feel so sick all the time. All I can eat is the inside of a bagel, and it's terrible. I don't want to puke in trash cans on the way to work anymore.
Meanwhile, Tom was busy at work. In fact, I wasn't sure if he was interested in my new self at all. For a man who had dedicated his life to learning and an obsession with science, and who professed to love women, it didn't feel like he was able to marry those interests with an eagerness to know more about what I was going through.
He didn't compliment my new body or share my fixation on its changes, or at least not as much as I wanted him to, and not in the ways that felt right to me. Add to all that the pressure I'd always felt, made up in my head or absorbed from the pop culture ether or both, that I simply had to be nonchalant about my own emotional needs in order to be desirable. There was no way I was going to be able to suddenly demand a new version of our marriage that felt adequate to my growing realization of my needs. Womanhood, in my estimation, was death by 1,000 cuts.
So at one point, the baby is kicking and she wants him to look. And he is just like, I'm busy. Stop it, I'm busy. And he won't even look at her. And she starts sobbing and going, you think I'm disgusting?
She is having a really hard time. She's emotional. It sucks. It's like she feels swollen. She's in pain. She's talking about the pain in her hips. She's talking about the pain in her breasts. She's talking about feeling nauseous. Just watching her body change, feeling uncomfortable in herself. Tom does not seem to be responding with more compassion, more concern, or even more time. He's often working late. She'll call him and be like, I need you. Can we hang out? I wonder if she ever says, I need you. She's calling and saying, can we meet up for a walk or can we meet up and people watch? Can we go out to dinner? And he's saying, no, I'm busy. I'm working.
I knew that I couldn't count on Tom for anything, for absolutely anything, and I was totally alone. At one point later in the book, she has a comment about having never made him her emergency contact. I will say, I agree with her that if you never vocalize your needs, how could anyone know?
But the definition of being a husband is being an emergency contact, and the idea that like you wouldn't know that if there was an emergency, you should be going.
And then also, but I was going to say even just the basic paying attention when you have an extremely pregnant and uncomfortable wife. Like, it's not a secret that she's uncomfortable. She's saying she's uncomfortable. She's just not saying, and can you help me?
Yeah.
And so then there's this thing of like, yes, I get that she fit more into his life than he.
But like if you see a pregnant woman on the train, you give her your seat. Like there's just basic human decency that it seems.
And I think the other thing is she didn't ask for much, but then when she got pregnant, she didn't know what that experience would be like. And so she didn't know what she would need. Like she didn't know her needs as much as he didn't know what she needed. And so while she's figuring out what she needs, I think one of the duties of a good husband is to like look for what's needed because neither of them have ever been pregnant before.
Yeah, she finds texts between him and her mom where he says, "Call me back. Sarah's so depressed. I don't know what to do. All I wanted was for him to spend some time with me and ask me how I was feeling, to never even look at another woman, to belong to me 100% in every way. And instead of doing that, which seemed easy enough, he'd made me someone else's problem." So this is an interesting thing that she does throughout the book. Tom seems pretty fucking awful in it. But throughout this book, and you see it more towards the end, she kind of has this thing she's doing where she's like, but also I was so out of control because I didn't even recognize my own depression and needs. Like I'm going to say that sentence again. All I wanted was for him to spend some time with me, ask me how I was feeling, and to never look at another woman, to belong to me 100% in every way. So like it starts from very reasonable, right? Like spend time with me, ask how I'm doing, as you should if you're a husband. For her to say to never look at another woman, maybe it seems like she's getting into like a outrageous territory here, but as we'll see in the next chapter, he's DMing other people. She found a text from him to an ex saying, "Hey, sexy, come visit me at the studio sometime. Same address as always." If your pregnant wife is crying, you do not text an ex. Even if your wife isn't pregnant, even if she isn't, you do not text an ex,
someone
"Hey,
else sexy,
come see me at my private workplace." That is insane. For her to be like, all I want is for him to not look at another woman and be 100% mine. I know that she's joking, and I feel like she's almost trying to be like, see, I was so crazy. All I wanted was...
that's the vows.
That's that's actually not an insane thing to ask for. And I understand why you felt the need to ask for it, because you were made to feel deeply insecure during a very vulnerable time in your life. And I think one of the failings of this book is her need to protect him because she's still with him. And this is the life she's chosen. She would rather have a famous artist husband than a faithful husband.
Yeah.
And so part of her mission in this book to make her current self understood is to be like, but it was so crazy for me to think he wouldn't text other women. That was just like mom brain. You forget that he has the right.
He told me it was important to him to maintain friendships with his exes. So I knew that. And it's like,
I never call Ashley sexy.
Not friendship. Can I say, I really don't think you should be calling your friends, well, no, men should not be calling their female friends sexy. This is going to sound sexist.
Yeah.
I just don't think they should do it.
The word sexy specifically means like attractive in the way I want to have sex with. And I don't think married men should be telling women that.
Except their wives.
Yeah.
That's just like what the vows are. I'm sorry. I guess I'm a fucking monogamist garbage person.
Did she bring it up to him? No, of course not. My stomach dropped and my cheeks grew warm, a reminder that these exchanges made me feel embarrassed for myself. I was, in a way, conditioned to being a second-class citizen in relationships. My mother had always emphasized her career over my company and the duties of motherhood. It wasn't the fact that she was a working mother that messed with my head, but the feeling that she preferred work to being a mother. And then the entire world trained me to believe that my worth was limited by virtue of the fact that I was a woman operating in a world revolving around men. These texts were just like catcalls in the street or having to placate pushy guys in bars. They stung and they made the voices in my head say things like, "You don't deserve better. If you were a more beautiful pregnant woman, this wouldn't happen. Or worst of all, don't complain because he will leave you and then you'll be alone."
I could guess what he'd tell me if I brought up the messages. I was just being friendly. It didn't mean anything. She knows I'm married. I love you. I chose you. So what was that to do? Divorce the man over silly, meaningless words? Then I'd have no one.
She also pushes for a nanny and he's like, "I don't know." And then finally she gets him by being like, "We get to work more if there's a nanny. You could do more work. You can go back to work immediately." So he gives in.
She hires a nanny. I mean, like a full-time baby nanny to come start as soon as the baby is born.
She's also having this pregnancy under the shadow of her sister's stillbirth, which is very traumatic and horrible. Her sister had been pregnant. the baby had not survived and
had not survived the birth.
Yeah.
Like they thought they were coming home with the baby, which is tragic.
It was like I was living in a frozen universe, trapped between a glacier of past sadness and an iceberg of potential future pain and trying to avoid both. The thought of expressing this to anyone or doing anything that could possibly be perceived as complaining seemed beyond egregious, by the way. My fetus was growing and thriving and I could afford to pay for medical care. I could have gone to therapy. I could have asked for professional help or meds. And that alone was an advantage, not available the world over. And of course I knew it. But when I thought about sitting on a couch and saying any of this out loud, it made me feel like a stupid mess of a person, like a failure of a good girl. I was raised not to complain, not to tell strangers my private problems. Wasn't therapy just another way to be self-indulgent? The more I ruminated on it, the more I hated myself for thinking I had jack shit to complain about. I had a great job. I was surrounded by art and artists. I was healthy. I had a husband who could say the same for himself. And maybe if I just held on long enough and focused on the positive, this period of disorganized, superstitious thinking would pass.
So she refuses a baby shower because she is very superstitious and afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like this trauma like really informed a lot more of her experience than she was acknowledging that it did.
Yeah. And again, I'm so interested in this idea that she wasn't allowed to have therapy because, as I've said, I cannot imagine she was in a world where people were not constantly going to therapy. And in fact, later in this book, when her and her husband are having real problems, he's like, I'll go to therapy. And she goes, you've been in therapy since you were 7. So I guess the real problem is her self-worth was so low. And I feel like we only hear about it.
I think she believes she did not deserve therapy.
Yeah. Like we only hear about her low self-worth in regards to like the infidelities and like neglect that she gets from her husband. But I think it goes beyond that. She's like, I don't even have a brain interesting enough. I'm just lucky to even be for the ride.
Yeah.
I don't have feelings or traumas. Only artists have feelings and traumas. There's a real like artist gallerist divide here of she's just the assistant to their genius.
I really think that the like, I didn't really know about therapy means I didn't know therapy was an option for me.
And I think that that's the phrase that I'm missing throughout this book. Because when she says things like, I didn't know motherhood would be hard, I think she's like, for me. I didn't know about therapy. I didn't know about therapy for me. Because I'm like, surely you know that they die sometimes, the women, the mothers.
Because I definitely recognize this like Midwestern upbringing where everything is like fine.
Mm-hmm.
You have feelings and your feelings can get hurt and like you can have experiences and things that even if they're not like objectively traumatic because you're like, right, well, somewhere in the world, they don't even have McDonald's and I have a McDonald's artist husband.
So this next chapter is called The Mother Wound and it's about her childhood in Indiana. And it reminds me so much of what you talk about growing up in the Midwest where you're like, yeah, if you were to ask me, I would say, nobody had any problems where I'm from. Nobody had any mental issues. And then you're like, but when I looked through it, every family on our block had like one person literally hospitalized for a mental illness.
Yeah. So like this reminded me a lot, like I really resonated with this chapter of being like, everything's fine. Everyone had all of their needs met.
But when you look closely, she's like, when I look back, actually, I went to high school with 2 daughters of literal serial killers. Like they found a bunch of human remains and chopped up bones in the backyard of my classmate's dad.
I know. And okay, I don't want to minimize the serial killeriness of it all, but I do feel like
that's the least of it.
It's the least of it. And then when
no, that's not the least of it. That's crazy, Ashley.
No. I don't want to minimize the serial killeriness of this. The serial killer stuff is crazy, but she talks about some of this other stuff like it was crazy and it is common.
Yeah.
But it's just not talked about. So she's like, yeah, a couple of the teachers in my school were sex offenders. And it's like, yeah.
That's statistically a couple of teachers in every school is a sex offender. Why do you think they work there? Because of the access to all the sex offending they can do.
Yeah, she goes, I went to high school with the daughter of a serial killer. Not 1, but 2 kids I grew up with had fathers who went to prison for child pornography. Listen, we had a pervert on my block. He had to go to jail. That's just what happens. And that was just my street. And she's like, oh my God, it was so Indiana. And I'm like, okay, the one serial killer, that's crazy. The rest of the stuff she's describing, I was like, yeah, that's towns.
Yeah.
That's what towns are like.
But the point is, none of this was discussed. And she was never allowed to go, wow, there was some crazy stuff here. You had to say everything was fine and picture perfect. Even the headmaster who committed suicide in his house.
Yeah.
On campus.
So when she was young, her mom had been a sex crimes prosecutor. And then after having 3 kids, was like, why is it so hard for me to get healthy food in Indiana? We're surrounded by farms, and started a farm-to-table restaurant.
That it now seems like a pretty prominent restaurant group with like over a dozen restaurants.
Yeah.
She said she's the largest single supporter of family-owned farms in Indiana. Like, she seems very successful, to be a very successful restaurateur as a woman.
I mean, to be a successful restaurateur at all, I think there's like 7.
Yeah, but when you're a woman, you
And
got
to be
those
a woman-
breasts to lug around, and that makes it even harder.
Exactly. And so she was a very successful restaurateur. She was very passionate about her work. She loved what she did. She would come home every day at 3 p.m. to like be with her kids and make dinner. But she was notably
grumpy about it.
Yeah,
Sarah was like, it was weird. She did this thing to be with us and like be a mother on her own terms. And yet it seemed like what she liked most about coming home and being with us was saying that we couldn't come in the kitchen and she was going to cook dinner away from us.
And her mom was like very disparaging about non-working mothers. She was very disparaging about people who just like did the cookie cutter suburban lifestyle. Like, she was very proud of her work as an entrepreneur. And the message was clear to me. To be the kind of woman I saw around me was going to disappoint my mother.
She often said the most important thing a family could do was eat together at a table every night, and she loved cooking. But then why did she seem so unhappy with all of us there with her while she made our meal night after night? We were forbidden from using the kitchen ourselves, and I swore I could sense how little she wanted to interact with me as she cooked and cooked and cooked. Risotto and roasted chickens and potatoes au gratin, pies and cookies and vinaigrettes on repeat.
I was fed, loved, sheltered, educated. My mom was home every night, fisting the chicken and slamming it into the oven, Madonna blaring, but her indignant responses to my needs, the hot and cold nature of a mom who at times could be sweet to me and other times seemed to despise the job of a mother, to despise me, felt like hostility towards motherhood itself.
She said her mom really rejected a lot of the femininity expectations. She didn't really wear makeup. She didn't really do her hair like the other women. Sarah, because of it, never felt like she was dressed appropriately. There was never any attention paid to her own outfit. She never felt like she was taught how to be pretty.
And then she's talking about motherhood at one point with her mom, and her mom says, the minute I heard you laugh, I wanted as many kids as I could have. She asked her mom, why did you have 3? I could see in her eyes that she was thinking about a memory. When I look back and think about my own reaction to impending motherhood, I can't help but see my extreme distress was informed by the anxiety that I wouldn't be able to be a mother and be happy at the same time. Though my mother had 3 children, something about dealing with them constantly had been anathema to her core identity, as if she were allergic to it.
She also has memories from growing up in Indiana of feeling unpretty. She like hooked up with this guy, Mark. This is impossible, Mark said bitterly. You're not even fuckable. I started to cry, which set him off, and he grabbed a plastic Evian bottle tucked into the pocket of his backseat, lobbing it at my head. Grow up, he muttered. When it hit me, the lid spun off and my hair was suddenly drenched with stale, lukewarm water, faintly plastic scented.
That's one of the worst virginity loss stories I've ever heard in my life.
He looked annoyed as drops slid down my face. I'm taking you home. Had I been hotter, a better prize, more docile, I wondered if he would have been nicer, tried harder to hide his frustration.
So then she goes into labor. She goes for a doctor's appointment, and the doctor is like, okay, your water broke. You have to go to the hospital right now. And she's like, no, I have a hair appointment today. And it's like really hard to get an appointment with this person.
You know what's so funny about that? Not
Huh?
to be mean. I was looking at her photos. I feel like she does not have a good color.
No.
She has quite a brassy, bleachy blonde that I feel any untrained person could accomplish. Not to be mean, but her hair looks specifically cheap.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that she had to go to Bergdorf and get this like really difficult to book person.
Well, maybe after she no-showed at this appointment, they never let her in again.
Yeah, she was barred.
Maybe her
from
hair
all.
used to look good.
And then she missed her appointment because of her stupid baby. It's the effect she wants, but the effect she wants is like very specifically and obviously kind of cheap looking, right?
Like the way she is a Charlotte York, but wants to be a
Camantha.
even less Camantha. Like she wants to be
Camarantha.
She wants to be an art hoe.
She wants to be Kat Marnell.
Yes. She wants to be like downtown cool, but she's also
Emerata.
obsessed with her highlight. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is what does not click for me is that she's like wearing little Chanel skirt suits.
Mm-hmm.
And like she mentions 100 times in this book that she gets her dresses hemmed so short that the tailor will be like, are you certain?
It's 32 inches below her collarbone.
Which is short. You know what I mean? Like this idea of her being someone who like won't go to the hospital because she needs to get her highlights done. And then when the doctor is like, you have to go, the highlights appointment is going to be too long. And she goes, well, can I at least go get a blowout? I feel like the girl who wears teeny tiny dresses and like gives children cigarettes is not the person who needs a blowout for her birth.
So the doctor keeps being like, you absolutely cannot go get your hair highlighted. You do not have the time. You have been like in labor for 8 hours already. You are open to infection. And they compromise by saying, fine, you can go get a blowout, but you don't have time to get it dyed. And so she calls Tom and is like, okay, I'm going to get a blowout. You grab my pregnancy bag or whatever, the labor bag, and you meet me at the hospital. And he goes, great. I just have a little bit of work to finish.
No, he doesn't. I don't think he says that.
Okay.
He's like, I'll go. But then he's taking way longer than expected.
So she's outside the hospital. The doctor's like, where the fuck are you? Time is up. You have to come in here. You're going to get infected. You are having a baby right now. And she's like, I don't want to go in until Tom's here. She calls Tom. Sorry, babe, he said after the 5th ring. It's so windy behind him. I could barely hear him. I had to do some final meetings and calls, but I'm in a cab and I'm almost there.
Can you fucking imagine?
I don't care if Mac is already holding a different baby. You drop what you're holding and you meet me at the hospital. A friend's.
Okay.
There's other babies. I'm just saying there's nothing in the world that I don't think you should literally physically drop. I don't care if you're holding a sandwich. You drop it. I want everything on the ground.
There's like nothing in the world more stop what you're doing and go.
I agree.
His lack of urgency felt antagonistic, a repudiation of all that I was feeling. I wanted him to meet my fear or at least acknowledge it. I mean, I understand the concept of like, he doesn't know what you need until you say it, but also guess.
I've never been pregnant. I've never had a pregnant partner. I'd assume going into labor is scary and I would be so nice.
Her water had only half broken, so they have to like manually rupture it.
I can't remember who, but I'm pretty sure we did also read a different memoirist who had this happen to them where they like pop your water for you.
And it's like,
it seems
horrific.
like one of the great traumas of birth. Like it seems horrible.
Read about it twice. And I think both times it seemed horrific. And I think both times it's been quite minimized by the doctors. And it feels like one of those things that like in medical school, they tell you is not that big of a deal. And so now all doctors just keep saying it's not that big of a deal, but it actually might be a massive deal.
The doctor will use what looks like a long knitting needle with a hook on the end to go through your cervix and rip a hole in the amniotic sac. That's what happened to me, and it left me breathless and gasping for air, shocked by the violence of the plastic tube plowing through my cervical opening and snatching a corner of my membrane. It made my legs and hands shake so badly that I had to get up and go to the bathroom attached to my room, shut the door, and stare at myself in the mirror just to confirm I was still there. Still real. I had blood all over my legs when I sat to pee and more of it on the scratchy hospital paper when I wiped. By the time I got out of the bathroom, someone had changed the sheets on my bed, but I could still remember the feeling of warm water exploding out of my body and wetting everything, of feeling so jarring and out of my control, pain so deep inside my body that I didn't even know it could hurt there.
But like when she originally introduces this, you haven't had a single contraction, she said, looking at the monitor. I think it's because your water isn't fully broken, so we need to break it for you. She sounded so casual.
If you're listening, be on guard for that. I do think that this is something I've learned from memoirs that watch your ass.
If someone says like, oh, we just had to do this thing real quick, and then you experience like earth-shattering pain, I think you're like, what the actual fuck? But I think if someone says, hey, we're about to do something, it's going to really suck, but we just had to get it done, then you experience earth-shattering pain and you're like, oh, that sucks.
I think they can give you like something for the pain.
Probably. So then she gets an epidural. Around 7 a.m, when Tom woke up, he yawned and stretched and stood up on legs that worked, barely looking at me. Then he went to stare out to the street below. I'm hungry, he announced, and then he left to get a hot dog from the Nathan's hot dog truck.
Maybe it was imagined due to stress, or maybe my needs were impossibly large, unable to be met by any mortal. However, to me, Tom's mind seemed elsewhere. He took phone meetings.
Just stop working, Tom. You literally make the stupidest art I've ever seen in my life. Take a break.
Someone else is going to make an owl out of a cinder block. Don't you worry.
But he has to do it first.
He took phone meetings and sent texts, not even asking me if I was okay. Or maybe he did and I just couldn't remember it. I'm not sure, but I know I felt a disconnect, like I didn't have his full support and attention. And without it, it seemed like there was no one trustworthy to remember and share the details with me later. I will say this is something she keeps doing for him, being like, oh, maybe he didn't and I just didn't know. Like, I'm going to guess he did not. I'm going to guess there was not an overwhelming sense of like love and care and compassion from his end, because when else has he given that to you?
Yeah, I've never seen it.
In all the years I've known him.
Anyway, so then they're like, okay, I think we're going to get ready to push. Where's Tom? And he comes sauntering in 20 minutes later with hot dog breath. And then the mom comes sauntering in with donuts, and she's not allowed to eat right now. And so they're all like chatting about food and laughing it up. And she just starts screaming at them. And then they're like, oh, I guess we'll get out. And she goes, no, fucking stay, but be normal. She doesn't say that, but that's what she means. So then she has the baby. When they put the baby on my body, I looked down at him and my heart sank. I felt nothing. No overwhelming love or happiness, no excitement, not even curiosity about him.
You didn't tear, the doctor said as I saw her hands moving between my legs at the end of the bed. I guess that's good, I replied meekly. It was as if the place in my body where I normally feel love or sadness was floating away. I don't think I could have gotten angry if someone had come up and slapped me. I don't think I could have gotten excited if someone had said I've won the lottery. It's good, the doctor replied, but I just gave you a stitch mostly for him. She nodded to Tom, who looked at me a little bewildered, furrowing his brow but not saying anything.
I'm going to murder this doctor, to be honest with you.
I think the husband stitch is one of the grossest things I've ever heard in my life.
Of course. I think this doctor, first of all, the popping of the sack was violent and evil. This extra stitch thing, I am like, you should go to jail.
Also, it seems like later, no spoiler alert, but she has some pretty gnarly postpartum depression. And the fact that it seems to go completely unnoticed by the doctor, which I guess also she did not feel safe with that doctor. It was not a doctor she was able to speak to honestly or openly about her experience because she had been so traumatized by that very one doctor.
I mean, it's very damning of the American medical system that then the breastfeeding specialist comes in and she goes, oh, I don't want to breastfeed. And they go, well, breast is best. Plus, it'll help you lose weight. Like, don't say that.
Anyway, she has this baby. What does she want after the baby's born? Sushi.
Guess who did not order sushi?
She forgot. He got her pizza. She could have pizza the whole time.
So she looks at her baby and is pretty not happy about what he looks like. All I saw in him were my flaws, the things I hated most about myself since childhood, and I'd felt the pain of my homely face so many times in my life. I knew the way it correlated to my value as a person, so when I looked at him, when I looked at this creature I had somehow birthed from my own loins, this being that supposedly was my whole raison d'etre. How do you say that?
Raison d'etre.
I was almost there. I saw my hideous nose, my weak chin, and all the insults from boys on playgrounds written all over him. I will say, it's different for boys.
I want it to be like, your son's going to be rich, dude. He doesn't even have to be good looking. I'd be like, look at your fucking husband. Is he going to look like him? He did pretty well. Or is it going to look like you? You did pretty well.
Yeah. I understand being a horribly insecure 20-something. I think that it like makes me sad that she was in her 30s, married, still this upset about what she looked like and upset about passing it down. I feel like you have to at a certain point be like, well, I look like what I look like. And things are fine.
Or if you think you're too ugly to live, then I guess don't procreate.
Yeah.
But you can't be like, you're so hideous, just like me.
But she was really depressed, so they're coming home from the hospital. When we pulled up to our small apartment building in Soho, the street was full of people, just like it always was. The crowds terrified me. I put on sunglasses, scared I'd see someone I knew and I'd have to say hi, or worse, have to show them my brand new baby.
She says she's scared to even ask her own mother, like, when do the maternal instincts kick in? Because she's like, what if they were already supposed to? So she just kind of keeps to herself that she's not liking it so far.
Yeah. She gets home.
They drop their things on the floor. Her parents are already there. He says, if you guys are going to be here a while, Tom looked at his cell phone, is it cool if I run to the studio? I just want to check in on this resin job I started before I left for the hospital.
Shut up, Tom. It's not cool.
The last thing this world needs is more resin. Have you been on Etsy? They've resined everything.
Are you fucking kidding me? It's not biodegradable.
We have enough resin.
That garbage you're creating, it's going to stay garbage forever.
We don't need resin McDonald's. The McDonald's is already lasting. Stand down, Tom.
So she's like, at least my dad loves babies. He can handle this. But her parents leave like right away. She thinks her mom and dad are going to stay in town for like a week or two. And then they were like, well, you've got this handled.
They're like, you don't want us in your hair. We'll head out. And she's like, please stay. And they're like, no, you got this. And she's like, don't leave me. And they're like, the plane. It's leaving in 2 days. We better get to the airport right now.
Her mom sucks ass.
She's like, could you guys go to the grocery store really quick for me? And they're like, we would, but we just don't want to.
Oh my God, literally. She's like, can you just pick some stuff up? And they're like, well, text Tom. And when he comes home from the studio, he can stop by the grocery store.
What she needs is cabbage to dry out her breasts since she's not planning on breastfeeding, as told to her by her nanny, Sharon, who is like a godsend.
Dude, Sharon's awesome.
She sounds like the nanny to have. She's basically like, what are you going to do to feed this baby? And she's like, I'm not breastfeeding. And Sharon goes, I don't give a fuck about you, to be honest. Then get me some formula and dry out your breasts.
I felt nothing for him. I was blank on the inside, hoping no one would enforce any mandatory snuggle time. Skin on skin, they called it. I could look at him only as if he were some sort of scientific sample. Anyway, so she keeps calling her baby ugly. And even her nanny is like, well, I mean, he's unfortunate, but he just came out of a vagina. So.
And it feels like it's something she's almost using as a litmus test to be like, will you be honest with me about anything? If I can't even trust you to admit my baby's ugly, then how am I going to trust you with my real emotions? It's something she tests people with constantly. And I think Sharon, her nanny, who is like a godsend in this book, the fact that she is willing to go, none of them are cute. Don't worry, it'll work out. He'll even out by the time he's like 4 or 5 months old, is why she's able to trust Sharon. And I think Sharon is obviously very good at this. She does it professionally.
And Sharon is very understanding. She says a lot of new moms feel this way. You'll get used to it and then you'll want 5 more. But I didn't want to have to get used to anything. I wanted to love it because it was lovable and amazing, not because I'd resigned myself to the fact that I was trapped in a hell of my own making.
So she completely isolates. She's like, I don't want anybody to come over and see this baby. I don't want anyone to see me. She's not answering even her friends' texts. She really is alone. And ironically, she's not alone with the baby. Sharon is almost completely taken over watching the baby. She goes in and forces herself to see him like 15 minutes a day, but she's like hoping he'll be asleep so she doesn't have to pick him up.
I couldn't explain how devastated I felt at the idea of my mother no longer being with me. She is like pretty regularly sobbing and staying in bed. And then after 3 weeks, she's like, I'll just go back to work.
She has this insane experience where like a week after they bring the baby home, Tom, to try to be romantic, texts her and he goes, hey, I'm going to stay late in the studio. Why don't you pack up some leftovers in the Tupperware and we can have a picnic dinner at my studio?
And she is 1 week postpartum. She's
actively bleeding. She's like, it takes me forever to get out of the house because I keep like bleeding all over my diaper. She drops the Tupperware. She feels like shit. She's exhausted walking. And it is like, why would she be bringing him dinner? Just fucking come home, Tom. But then later she tries to make this out as if like she was overreacting. How could he have known? And I go, everybody knows. You go home to the baby and the postpartum lady.
He's also like 50. Like he's an adult. I will say when she's complaining to her sister kind of yells at her and she's like, no, that was probably fucked up of me. I would say there's like one person you can't complain about like not liking your baby to.
She goes back to work after 3 weeks, bleeds over stuff, kind of freaks out, has a meltdown. She's noticing that her brain is like not firing the way it used to. She's struggling to remember stuff. She's feeling foggy. She thought going to work would help push through it, but it just makes her feel worse.
And she like knows about postpartum depression, but she feels like she just is different and that's not what she has. Mothers I knew told me about their postpartum journeys and they didn't resemble anything like what I was going through. If they had quote unquote depression, it felt like graceful bouts of weeping, sadness on their beds, which didn't remotely mirror my pockets of rage or what I would later come to recognize as something akin to cyclical psychosis. Other people are talking about their postpartum experience. She just like cannot lock it with her.
Yeah. And I do think she says like that's part of depression is depression has this trick it plays where they go, you're not depressed. You're rightfully miserable because only you see how bad things are.
Yeah.
You can't be fixed with medication. You just have this understanding. Yours is different.
Like yours is different and you don't have depression. You have the worst life.
Yeah.
Tom tries to be like, why don't you go do some more self-care? He's like, I hate seeing you like this. So he knows that she is not well. And his response is like to pay for stuff and not help.
I deduced that what I was experiencing was just motherhood, rich nanny-assisted motherhood, for which I had zero justifiable complaint. In mid-November, it got cold. Tom was out of town for a few nights on some work trip, and Sharon and I were home with Guy.
That's the baby.
Yeah.
He's called Guy, but he's not a guy. He's a baby.
It turns out Guy has a fever. They take him to the ER. She calls Tom, and Tom is kind of like, well, it's the middle of the night. Let me know how he does, and hangs up. Obviously, she's freaking out, but I almost feel like she's more freaked out and upset about Tom. And Sharon has to kind of snap her and go, well, Tom can't even do anything. It's just us. Your focus is this baby. We'll be mad at Tom in the morning. And Sharon is also like, yeah, Tom sucks.
Yeah, Sharon hates Tom.
Tom sucks. When they get home, she has this almost feeling of relief. Like, look how worried I was when Guy was sick. That does mean I love him. And in response, she's like, I guess I should start scrapbooking. As like, she's like, wow, I love my baby. And what do you do when you love someone? You scrapbook about them. And so she calls her friend that she calls Augusta, that I have a theory is actually the founder of Hill House.
Nell Diamond.
Yes, that's my suspicion based on Instagram stalking. And she's like, you were right. When the baby got sick, I did realize how much I loved him. So I'm scrapbooking. And Nell is like, how about you actually take that love and fucking spend time with your baby?
I hate her friends. And if it is Nell Diamond, I'm dead right that I hate her friends. I don't know if I'm like hating a nameless, faceless person that I don't know or if I'm hating a person that I really don't like.
So she's like, oh, totally, hangs up, goes to start scrapbooking anyway. But then it struck me that if I wrote down a bunch of stuff about Guy, it might tempt the universe. It seemed too dangerous to affirm his life so clearly. I shuddered and felt the energy that had been bouncing around my body start to drain out, leaving me cold. The thought of unwittingly willing something bad to happen to him with my brazen scrapbooking efforts was too terrible to dwell on. I needed a distraction.
So then her friend is like, maybe you should be taking him to some more classes and mommy groups and like make some friends. And so she goes to one of these musical groups at the library, and afterwards a couple moms invite her out for coffee afterwards. And
of course, everything they say is wrong no matter what they say. So first they're all like, don't you love your baby? And she's like, I can never relate to these losers. And then one of them's like, yeah, I actually had to get on SSRIs for my postpartum depression, and now I'm so much better. And she's like, who would go on SSRIs? I can't relate to this depressed lady. I'm not happy and I'm not depressed. I'm a secret third thing that only I have. But I will say, I think that is the problem.
Yeah, that's the disease getting her.
Getting her good. But of course, I do feel like I feel like, especially New York City moms have such a thing about being like, I'm not just going to have mom friends. Why would they be any less cool than you? I can't stand that shit. If you're there, like you're there.
Not even just New York City. I feel like it's all people being like, I don't want to just be like in a mommy and me group. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you be?
It's so weird the disdain they have. I'm like, when you went to school your whole life and made friends at school, what was that if not a random collection of people? Why wouldn't you, now that you have a kid in school, be friends with the parents of the kid in that school? I don't understand why that would be a worse random splattering of people than any other group.
Yeah.
What else are you doing?
What better to ramble about every intricacy of your child's day with than someone who has a child also having an intricate day?
Like going through the exact same thing. I feel like there's a post-college idea of like, oh, they're my coworkers, but they're not my friends. So they're just the people I get drinks with every single day, who I spend 9 hours a day with 5 times a week, but they're not my friends.
They're the people who like know the most about what's going on in my day-to-day life.
But why would I be friends with them? We're just people who seem to have ended up in the exact same place in life. We're just physically in the same room most of the time. What would I have in common with them? You're right. The only time to make a decent friend is freshman year of college. That's the only reasonable group of randos. The rest of the randos of the world, they suck. You're above them.
I decided I wasn't depressed. I was just an aggravated, spoiled little shit who didn't like responsibility and thought my baby was ugly. In other words, I was a monster. And so then she's thinking about her mom and her mom's motherhood journey, and she feels so sad. And so like, what would I be without my mom? And, you know, she sucked it up and did it. So why can't I suck it up and do it?
She talks about the mom who was on antidepressants, and she said, something about this stranger opening up about her need for antidepressants hit me. It seemed almost impolite, her vulnerability. Where I came from, no one talked about their psych needs, of course. But even in my adult life in New York, I hadn't often encountered women willing to do more than hint at their problems.
I have something to say about her, and this is what I think I really don't like about her so much.
Maybe she's not like a good friend. Maybe she's not someone people feel they can open up to.
Yeah, that's part of it. I just think that in this like world where she says no one talks about this and no one talks about that, and she has a very definitive like version of herself and what's acceptable and what's cool and what's right. And I think that this is the problem with like finding a cool older boyfriend at 22 and like never discovering your actual sense of self is everything in your life is the idea of something. You have no like grounding qualities. And so everything is not actually what's going on. It's her idea of what should be going on. So like she believes no one in the art world is talking about therapy, but like that's her idea of what a cool art party is like. And she's never enough of a person at these parties to have a real conversation.
I guess I don't know if that's true. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, I know what it's like to have a conversation with her at a party. I guess I do think like she seems like somebody who's like about town. I don't know that she's just like a little shadow of a person in the corner. Like, I actually don't think that that's...
No, I don't think that that means she's a shadow of a person in the corner. I think that means she's like a person very involved. Everything she uses to define herself is like a thing she doesn't do. Like, we don't talk about this. I don't do that. I was never raised to understand this. This is not something I like. She's so bogged down in like her idea of self and what she's not that she like isn't.
I agree and I disagree. I do feel that she is somebody who's very driven by her central passion.
Okay.
She didn't just like walk outside of her house in Indiana and end up in an artist's loft in Soho. She has made deliberate choices in her life to end up exactly where she wanted to be.
Yeah.
It just turned out she got there and parts of it really suck.
Yeah. I guess I wonder how much of it is like her idea of what that thing is supposed to be versus what it is. You know what I mean? Like you saying she loves her husband. I guess it's hard for me to understand because reading this, I'm like, who could love that husband?
Yeah.
Like you love the idea of him.
But I do like want to defend her. I do feel she's like passion driven. Like she talks a lot in this book how much she loves art.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like the joy she finds, and like that is part of the lifestyle that comes with him, and she gets access to all this like
I think
art.
She loves art, and I personally feel, and we'll get to this later, I think she becomes passion driven. I think she's like finding herself here and like bogged down in a lot of what isn't. You know, she's in New York, downtown. So a lot of the moms are very image conscious, it seems. You have to keep up with yourself. Older mothers I knew had told me, keep the spark alive in your marriage by losing the pregnancy weight and putting on lipstick and making the time to leave your baby, get your hair and your nails done. You have to let your husband take you on dates. I don't think that that's what she needs to hear right now. The minute I left the spa, finished the hair appointment, or walked out of yet another yoga class, there I was all over again. And worse yet, there he was, the baby. But I kept trying.
So she has two friends in this book. One's Petunia, her kind of like single friend who's still a gal about town. And then her friend Augusta, who's like the married mom of two that loves mother's life. And she kind of uses both of them as archetypes to bounce her ideas off of. They're questioning her about why she didn't enjoy the mom group. Why don't you want other moms to complain endlessly about? Isn't complaining endlessly your entire personality? I'd long looked at New York City as the mecca for those who wanted to be different, who wanted to interrogate everything that seemed conventional. When I left behind my cushy suburban life, I hadn't been to do coffee dates with women who didn't seem to want to question our societally defined parental roles, who I couldn't be honest with about my experiences, least of all my experience as a mom. I'd always relied on my career and extracurriculars to help me feel like it was worth it to have strayed far from home. And somehow I ended up knee-deep in perspectives on parenthood that I thought a life in New York would insulate me from. It's not that I thought enjoying motherhood was bad. I wished I enjoyed it. But I didn't think that in New York, of all places, I'd have to pretend. I do think like this is something where I'm like, well, you didn't. You chose to.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of people actually in New York are interested in interrogating parental roles, but you specifically cannot because you live underneath the umbrella of your husband who's not interested in being a dad outside of name only.
Yeah.
Like you found the Midwest equivalent of a father in terms of like he comes home for dinner maybe, but dinner should be on the table and he's not going to help out and he's not going to accommodate the baby or you.
Yeah.
It's not their fault that what you see reflected back to you is the choice you made.
Also, I feel like New York is not a homogenous town. There are a lot of different types of families and relationships. I think that there is like a classic type of young couple where it's like a finance husband and like a wife that like move out to Westchester once they have it. Like that is a version of New York.
She's not within like the down and out art scene of New York City. She's not Patti Smith at the Chelsea Hotel.
Yeah.
She entered this world via the Gagosian Gallery, which is like the highest level. It is the upper echelon. She's dealing with like people with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars buying art that they don't give a fuck about because it's a good investment and bragging rights piece. When you are like only dealing with other rich people in New York, they're normal as hell. They're traditional as fuck. Like you can't be on the Upper East, and I know she's not technically on the Upper East Side, but I'm sorry, to be in a giant loft in Soho.
The vibes are Upper East Side.
Like there's a certain level of money where you've gotten there because you cling to traditional values, especially when the money is all coming from the man.
Yeah.
When you're a hot 23-year-old who married essentially your old boss with a ton of money, guess what? You haven't really dispelled any traditional roles. You've like walked right into them.
And that's the thing is if she wanted this like cool New York City thing,
she should do what I do and start a podcast and then date a 22-year-old when she's 40. I'm the only one questioning anything.
Like what she's looking for is not what she's doing.
Mm-hmm. And that's something she has to interrogate within.
Mm-hmm. Then her husband is like, we have to go to the Guggenheim Gala tonight. And she's like, absolutely the fuck not.
And then he says, we have to. We're guests of the Baldwins.
Ilaria.
Imagine letting Ilaria down.
At the Guggenheim.
If Ilaria can leave her 7 children behind, you can leave 1 child behind. She's got 7 children and 4 cats and 4 dogs.
So she starts popping Vikes.
Yeah, so she's like, I'll just do a bunch of drugs. She does shrooms, Vicodin, and then she starts drinking. And then she shows up in a dress that she rips. And her underwear says like, fuck me on it.
And so she's walking around with her 2 shout. And her husband is like, okay, actually, we should go home.
And she's like, why? Meanwhile, she had been really spiraling because she had watched a woman like touch his arm and he was flirting with another woman at a bar. Which, you know what? It would actually send me into a fucking tailspin too.
And he's like, why are you laughing? What's wrong with you? Like something's not right. But then he doesn't ever do anything about it. Like it's very obvious that she's losing her fucking shit. She has her ass out at the Guggenheim.
In retrospect, that was the moment my spiral really got going. It felt so good to not care. Drugs were a miracle. I thought I can feel like this anytime I want, like nothing matters and everything is funny and silly. I can feel stupid and okay with being stupid. I can feel euphoric. As I sat in the taxi with Tom, watching him silently scroll through his phone, I thought about which crooked doctor from my 20s I could call to get some more pills.
So then she has a postpartum appointment and she's going to get an IUD. And watching the doctor examine her, she feels like she's splitting in half. She's terrified.
She feels like completely disconnected and shut down, but at the same time, like the nerve damage when you have a baby, she like can't physically feel it. And the doctor's like, yeah, you probably noticed if you've had sex. You're not going to feel anything down there for a while. And she's like, uh-huh.
And, you know, the doctor asks her some standard questions and nothing comes of this appointment other than her now feeling terrified of doctors.
And she gets into the cab and she kind of has a breakdown and she starts talking about all the hell that comes with like having a vagina and all the like horrible, like the ways that experience with the gynecologist mimics so many awful sexual experiences with men who seem to just like probe you and prod you and not treat you like a person, and regardless of how you're feeling emotionally or physically, that you're just like this receptacle or an orifice. And she's like having a breakdown and she's screaming and she's upset.
And she calls Petunia and she starts talking about the ways that like women are constantly violated. And Petunia goes, you have to go to therapy.
I don't know why no one else is telling you this, and maybe you'll hate me forever, but please go to therapy.
And so she starts with a therapist. And this is the other thing. She knows lots of people who go to therapy, and lots of people do go to therapy, but there are two versions of therapy. One is like going to therapy in name only, and that you can check off the list and say, I have a therapist and I talk to them. And two is like trying.
Yeah, therapy doesn't work unless you want it to, unless you're willing to go there and do the work.
Yeah.
Therapy works if you work it.
So she gets a therapist, but not a working therapist. After her like major breakdown and like a lot of shit happens, he goes, you'll go to LA for a month and then we'll go to Bali.
So then that's the chapter where she was in the Chateau Marmont. So then she's like, okay, so we're on our way to Bali. And I had read that monkeys could steal your baby. And that's my thing. I'm obsessed with being like, well, a monkey's going to steal our baby.
It does seem like no matter where she is, like she won't let her baby go near stairs because she thinks that her baby will fall down the stairs and crack its head open. And I'll tell you,
that's valid.
What?
I'm so scared of stairs.
Can I tell you something? My brother fell down the stairs a lot and he's just fine.
Babies get bonked. That's why their heads are so soft so that you can mold them back.
Yeah, it's like clay.
Yeah. They're clay up until a good 3 years. But like part of her depression is she's always imagining. She's like imagining hearing the baby cry, imagining seeing the baby fall, imagining the baby get stolen by monkeys.
Yeah.
She says, every time I crept up to the edge of honesty, I pulled myself back. I feared what was on the other side, not realizing how much worse it was to be stuck in my little self-made purgatory. I spent way too many therapy sessions complaining about Tom's failings and felt camaraderie when my therapist agreed with me that yes, he could be frustrating. I told her, my voice breaking into raw sobs, how mad I was when he dropped Guy at the pool a few days before, which still made my hand shake when I thought about it. I guess something so interesting about this book to me is the way that she's like, isn't it crazy I thought Tom was the problem? And I'm like, no, I do think he was part of the problem. I think there was a couple of problems here. And I think one of them was that you were completely unsupported by your husband, who's supposed to be like your number one source of love and support. What I didn't know then was that my rage at Tom was a red herring distracting me from the real issue, a deeper inner grief that I would have done anything to avoid. My anger at him was a symptom of a much bigger problem. If I focused on how often he chose his work over me and the baby, or how he seemed to fuck up everything I asked of him, I could shield myself from my real despair, which seemed to be getting thornier and darker, pulling me down into the bog. It was so much easier to think about all the ways he'd managed to let me down since I'd found out I was pregnant than to think about whatever was at the core of my own sadness. I do think he was there. I get it wasn't just a room with only him, but he is at the core of your sadness.
He's not a red herring distracting you from the problem. He is a problem in addition to the problem that perhaps contributes to the problem.
He's a comorbidity.
Yes. Can you imagine someone being like, your husband, that's a comorbidity.
I think like statistically they are.
I know.
Quite often.
So then they're in Bali. She's just hanging out at the hotel room with Guy and Sharon the whole time. And Tom's always like going down to the beach, going surfing. And one day he's like, you have to come surfing with me. Please come surfing with me. So she goes surfing with him. She gets pulled under, swallows a fuck ton of water, trudges back to the room. And she's like, I didn't want to even go surfing anyway. And gets insane food poisoning.
Okay, so she like spends the whole vacation guarding the room to make sure that
monkeys
don't attack. Which she's like, a monkey got in the pool and he came at me. They're vicious. And he's like, you're such an idiot. He doesn't say that, but he is like, why are you so obsessed with the baby? We're on vacation. Just come hang out. And yes, she swallows a bunch of ocean water, gets super sick. It turns out that after it like rains, sometimes sewage floods into the ocean, and she had just probably like eaten a ton of literal human shit. And she gets food poisoning in a way that I'm like, dang. She's shitting, she's pissing, she's puking. He's still like, let me just do a quick afternoon surf. And when he comes back, he's like, how come there's a ton of empty Gatorades out there? And she's like, well, they brought me Gatorade, but because you weren't here to open the door, They left him outside. And then when you were gone, the monkeys ate the Gatorade. I would kill him. I'm like, dang, lady, you put up with a lot.
It's all your fault, I told him, with each sob snowballing into the next. You made me surf. You made me come here. You left me all day. And then he goes, I'm sorry, what can I do? And she goes, just order dinner for Sharon. Order her fish. Sharon does not eat red meats.
He orders her a steak and he goes, I forgot. What? He goes, it's a fixable problem. And she's like, it's not fixable. And I think she thinks she seems insane here. She's like writing herself as this crazy. It's not fixable. Actually, it seems to be an unfixable problem that you never listen to your wife. This is it's not about the fish here, but it is about Tom.
It is about Tom. I'm sorry. He abandoned you when you were spewing out every hole. It's so gross.
And she's like, you're the problem. And he's like, yeah, I'm the problem because I took our family on a vacation to Bali. And I guess I'm like, did you take your family? You're like, you're on a vacation. Your family's also here. And so is the nanny.
Also, there's one line where he's like, I'm sorry that I turned my work trip into a great trip for all of us. And it's like, okay, so this actually wasn't even a family vacation. Why did you go here?
Sarah, I took a trip I had to do for work and turned it into a luxury Balinese vacation for our family. I called the doctor for you. I don't know how else to support you. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't even know what I'm doing right. He seemed genuinely confused. That made me so mad. The word
support there is so crazy because he has so far done actually jack shit that would fall under the umbrella of support.
You know, there were days you didn't even ask me, hi, Sarah, how are you doing today? How do you feel today? How was your pussy today, Sarah? Since it just squeezed out my child. Entire days, I kept a tally. How was I supposed to recover mentally or physically when no one cared about my mental or physical state? Well, you win because I didn't recover. Nothing is right. From my hips to my belly to my brain to my hair, nothing is right. Tom took a big sigh, let his shoulders fall, and stared at the ground. I hear you, Sarah. I really do. I'm sorry that I haven't done enough, and I can tell that you are really, really not okay, but I'm out of ideas. Do you want me to leave you? I don't mean that in a threatening way, but would it be easier for you if I moved out for a while?
What if I shot him in his dick?
Hey, I noticed me not trying at all has been really hard for you. Would it be better if you weren't constantly reminded of how little I was trying by leaving? Let's think of a second thing you could do.
Try.
Could you try? No. You have two options. I could sit here and not try, or I could go elsewhere.
Dude, I want to kill him.
She just said he was only a symptom. He was a red herring. You think that's red herring behavior? For him to have just come back from surfing and been like, how else could I support you? You're not even here. So after this, she makes him go sleep at the pool.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed. I was messy and ashamed of it. A horrible person, a nasty, ungrateful bitch, a miserable, sad, ugly woman.
Why would he get to sleep inside?
I was right and I was justified, and I was wrong and I was disgusting. I was an empty shell in every way, devoid of anything lovable.
Why would he have gotten to sleep inside?
You are like a deeply depressed person with no support system at all, with food poisoning in Bali. If I was you, I would kill myself.
At the beginning of this episode, Claire said, I have my period, and it's, quite frankly, a mild week this winter.
Yeah, but still, it hasn't been, and the body keeps the score. My body remembers that just last week it was 20 degrees.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, you're not shitting and pissing with no husband in Bali.
Thank God. And it just drinks sewage halfway around the world. With an ugly little frog baby in the next room who's desperate to get stolen by monkeys.
Oh, it sucks because nothing's cuter than a baby who looks like a frog.
I know. And she's like, how could it be cute when it's ugly? I'm like, oh, hello. Ugly cute. That's the cutest kind.
The cutest kind of baby is one that looks like a weird little baby.
Have you ever seen a dog that can't walk or look right? That's the best dog.
Anyway, so then she goes to her general practitioner, who she has not seen since before she had the baby. So not her OBGYN, just the regular doctor she goes to, because she's like, I just got really bad food poisoning in Bali. I'm really fucked up feeling. Anything we can do about that? And her general practitioner starts asking her some questions that lead her to the conclusion that Sarah has horrible postpartum depression. And she's like, are you seeing a therapist? And she's like, kind of. And this doctor prescribes her antidepressants like right off the bat, which I agree with Sarah. This is kind of concerning.
It needs to be monitored.
It needs to be monitored, and you should be like talking about what's making you this depressed while taking antidepressants. But her doctor's genuine concern and actual questions and like looking her in the eyeballs really create a turning point. And so she fires her therapist and gets a new therapist because she can't bear to be like, oh, for the last 8 months, I was just kind of shooting the shit.
And so she starts talking about like her birthing experience, the trauma of having her amniotic sac kind of broken, not without her consent, but without her like educated consent. And they start saying, well, what are other times when you felt like this? Like, how do you feel when you're with your baby? And she goes, I feel like almost paralyzed with fear. And they're tracing that feeling. And she recalls a guy that she met when she was like in her 20s or in her early 20s in college. And he was an artist and he took her on a date. And he was obviously kind of a douchebag, but he like wined and dined her. And he was older and he was so cool. And he took her on these cool dates and was being so nice. And then they got back to the city. He had her meet her at a bar with all of her friends. And she gets there and he goes, play it cool. My fiance's here. And immediately she's like, oh, I feel like an idiot. What an asshole. Months later, she runs into him again. And he's, of course, laying on thick, like, I'm so sorry. That was like a complete mistake. We've been broken up when I met you. And then she like begged me to take her back, but now it's over. Let me apologize. Come back to my apartment. I want to say sorry properly. And she goes and he assaults her.
Yeah. And so she has this like association from this feeling of your body being handled like completely without your consent in these like horrible and violent ways. She like starts associating them all. And Tom was not present and like not helpful during the birth. And so she starts like evening out all men into these like evil, awful creatures, and she can't trust anybody.
She's told by one of her friends, Augusta says, think about it like this. If Tom yelled at you all the time and got angry about random things you weren't even aware you were doing and practically spit at you that he hated you so much, would you accept him saying like, oops, too bad, it was my trauma? So this is why she's like, okay, I have to like forgive Tom and I have to work on myself because it's not enough to just like blame my trauma why I'm so mad at him. But again, I'd say I actually think you're quite reasonably mad. She's like, oh, it's so unfair to Tom. I was projecting all of my hatred towards other men at him. And I'm like, no, he was unfortunately proving the rule.
Yeah.
You were saying men are all evil. And then he kept showing up and not helping you with your fucking baby. And you were going, oh no, and even my husband.
But she's talking to her therapist, and her therapist says, rage is how we hide realer emotions. So write down everything you're feeling and it's all valid. And so she's going with her therapist through all these experiences she's had and all of the rage she's feeling and all of the fear she's feeling. And they're kind of like pulling them apart like threads and detangling these instances from one another so that she can get to the core of
how her husband's innocent. At one point, her therapist says, have you ever Googled personal accounts of what it's like for women to have their amniotic sac broken after they've received drugs to be induced? No, I haven't, I replied. I felt dumb. I hadn't even thought to. I'd been so convinced that my pain was my own overreaction that I hadn't even thought to compare it with anyone else's. And the doctor's like, your reaction is completely normal. This is actually a very standard, like how you feel is how a lot of people feel.
And so she starts realizing that her feelings are not invalid, that they're not never before felt by anyone on this earth. She starts to like untangle her hatred towards herself because her therapist is like, yeah, it's hard to love something that reminds you of someone you hate.
She ultimately like fulfills her Zoloft prescription. No one I knew admitted to taking SSRIs, and I didn't know enough about them to understand who they were right for. I'd read the memoir Prozac Nation, and the protagonist seemed brilliant but absolutely batshit. Was taking meds admitting that I was mentally ill as her. For some reason, while I had no problem popping a Percocet and chasing it with a glass of full-bodied red, I was unsure if I really wanted to make the commitment to take an antidepressant every single day.
So then she starts like realizing that not all postpartum depression looks the same. And that even though there is like a standardized list of questions, the fact that those questions didn't match up to her experience.
And she finally starts allowing herself to be really honest in therapy and realizing like how guilty she feels about not loving her baby. I feel like I failed at everything. I'm not the strong person I thought I was. And when I tell any of this to Tom, he's going to realize how damaged and pathetic I am. He's going to be so grossed out by what other men did to me because it wouldn't have happened if I had been smarter and stronger. It's like only someone worthless would have been treated that way. And if Tom finds any of this out, he's going to see the truth, which is that I must be worthless. Or it wouldn't have happened to me.
Start the meds and we'll talk in a week. Still sniffling, I walked to the nearest CVS and dropped off my prescription. So finally, she's taking antidepressants. It's Guy's first birthday, and they're in London for a first birthday party / of course, a Tom's gallery.
Well, they're in London for his gallery thing. And then because that's when the baby was born, there's also going to be a first birthday.
Yeah. And so like all of their friends and family fly to London. She's crying in the bathtub, but it's like a different kind of crying. And then when she goes to Guy's room to get him dressed, like she's feeling so much more excited about his existence. I'd never have the mom I wanted, and I would never be the mom I wanted to be. This is what she's crying about in the bath. But then she goes and she gets him ready, and she's feeling like genuine gratitude, not forcing herself to write a gratitude list. She's really
like, I love this baby. Look at him say elevator. He's so cute. She looks at Tom. Let's remember that transference is a psychological basis, not an absolute, my therapist explained. Let's not ruin your whole marriage because of it.
For the past week or so, I'd found myself strangely drawn to his crib instead of just like going to his room for her like prescribed, just don't forget that I know you time. She's really excited to be spending some time with him and she's fascinated by his babbling and his movements.
And Tom is also like putting in an effort. Like he's at the hotel with food when she arrives and she's like, okay, I'm like open to recognizing how he is trying.
I hope I hadn't already fucked him up. I knew, of course, that he had been cared for even in my worst hours. He had a nanny and both his parents, and he had endless advantages. But until I'd gone to therapy and started antidepressants, I knew I'd been totally checked out.
She's like, I'm really starting to love him. And Tom is like, me too. And she's like, maybe every night we should talk about one thing we like about him. And he's like, that's such a great idea. I could feel my jet lag kicking in. I wanted to respond that I didn't think it was normal for a mother to have to learn to love a child, but I was too tired to get into it just then. Plus, I thought just before I fell asleep, maybe I had loved him a little bit all along. Maybe I've just been too scared to let myself feel it. So now it's October. He's like 13 months old. Things seem to be going good. She's feeling much better. Therapy is helping. The medication is helping. She's learning to enjoy motherhood. Her and Tom are working on like finding each other again.
Because she's not hating motherhood so much, she's no longer like repulsed by him. Like, I don't know that he's really making any actual effort towards anything, but like she's less mad at him.
She's also trying to accept her mother. She says, that version of my mother needed to be enough. Was it the antidepressants, therapy, my hormones settling down, or simply the passing of time that allowed me to feel this way?
Her mom comes to town to visit and like really just does not make time for her or Guy. It's really
crazy.
Bizarre.
At first, I thought she was being just kind of a bitch to her mom. But then the things her mom will be like, I'm coming to town to see my grandson. And then she'll be like, you know what? I'm just going to take a nap instead. And you're like, you came to New York to take a nap? That's crazy. At one point, she lied about when she was leaving. She's like, well, I got to get back to the airport. And it turned out her flight was the next day. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's a crazy lie.
In this one, her mom is like, okay, well, I've had work calls all day, but how about I come this evening and spend time with Guy and then we'll go to dinner. And then she's like, great, bath time is at 6. I'll put him to bed at 7 and then we can go get dinner. And the mom texts her at 6:15 and is like, you know what? I'll just meet you at dinner. And it's like, what do you mean you're skipping bath time? That's the cutest time.
And of course, she's hurt, but they end up going to get martinis at Balthazar. And she's like, you know what? I just have to accept my mom for who she is. I can't get so mad about this stuff. And then her mom like has this honest conversation with her where she's like,
I guess this honest conversation made me madder.
Yeah, she goes, I remember how hard it was for me and I am so mad at myself for not warning you and for not doing more for you. I really am. She says, I really should have warned you. I'm kicking myself. Did I ever tell you about after you're born how much I hated your father? And they have this conversation about like how hard it was for her and how her dad just didn't understand the exhaustion.
I just should have spilled to you about all this. I don't know why I kept it so secret. When I had you, I had no help. My parents didn't babysit and your father's parents were down south. Like you have the opportunity here to
break
do
that
it different.
Yeah.
Like you're literally in town and you couldn't show up to babysit.
Join for bath time.
Join for bath time.
She literally has just not seen her grandson.
She's also like a fully independent entrepreneur. Take a week off and just
Take an hour off. Why at 6 p.m. can you not watch your grandson take a bath?
Like she has all the resources to be extremely present and just like actively chooses not to. And it's crazy.
And they're really having this honest conversation. And Sarah finally says, so do you think you ever had postpartum depression? And before she gets a chance to answer, Tom shows up.
Yay.
And she's like, oh my God, Tom, the best daddy in town. That's the grandma. And I'm like, okay, we don't have to lie.
I'd have to accept the reality that I was never going to get everything I wanted from our relationship, but maybe accepting that is part of growing the life cycle, leaving space for me to build my own bonds with the family I was creating and so on. I feel like that's just like what she has to believe in order to maintain the relationship with her mom. Like she can cut her out or she can not.
Yeah, I agree. Tom stops by Balthazar to give her a gift.
Ooh,
and I'm excited to hear about your opinions on it, Ashley. So she opens she's like, okay, our anniversary is next week. This is a little early. What is this for? She opens it and it's a zine. I look so sullen in the cover photograph. In collage typewriter script across my leg, it reads, my beautiful, poorly behaved wife. Inside, there were 10 photos of me that I had never seen before. In between each one was another photograph, some examples of a mess I'd left. In one, there was a wet towel left on the bed. In another, a belt I borrowed from him and forgotten in a pile on the couch with a pair of worn underwear. One page had a bag of dog shit that I'd picked up and left outside our apartment, unable to find a trash can. At the very back was a love note typed in Hermes baby typewriter, a wartime Swiss machine. To my perfect queen, the best mother, the most beautiful wife, the messiest and only one I'll ever love. And he says, so you'll always remember the last year, the contradiction and the pain and the mess and the beauty. I love you, Sarah Hoover. I know it's been hard, but you're absolutely brilliant woman. I've been thinking about it since the day we got home from London, and I just finished this today. I don't know where you're going exactly, but I know it's going to be profound, and I'm so lucky to be on the ride with you.
This man needs to be shot off the rafters.
Okay, so you didn't think it was sweet.
Imagine if not only was your husband in your like depths of postpartum depression, which has now been diagnosed. She's now on antidepressants and feeling better.
Don't forget, you were disgusting.
Imagine being like, I wasn't cleaning up after myself. You weren't cleaning up after either of us. Imagine being like, oh, trust me. It's not that I don't notice mess. You know how sometimes guys are like,
I didn't even see it there.
What ring on the countertop? Oh, I didn't know. Imagine being like, I noticed it and I took a picture and it's still there.
So I was trying to put myself in her shoes because I went, well, I'd kill someone who did this for me, right? This is
in front of your mom.
After all this, all you like, what a reminder of, I'm struggling thinking I'm the worst mother in the world. I'm struggling coming out of a depression. And here's this forever reminder that I'm like a disgusting, awful person. But I think she liked it because she keeps saying throughout this book, all I wanted from Tom was for Tom to...
She wants him to notice, and he's noticing.
Because she says, I didn't want to go on antidepressant medication. I wanted Tom to see me for all of my mess and who I am and love me anyways. I wanted him to like want to be around me more. Like she's like, I want him to see me crashing out and like pay attention. And so I think she thinks this is like, wow, look, just as I had hoped, a man who sees me in my darkest moment and like loves that.
He turned my mess into art.
Yeah, he like sees how gross and disgusting I am and he loves me still. And not just in spite of, but because of. But I will say this mess is not her, it's a depression. And I think, you know, my crumbs, those are me. That's me at my best. At my best, I'm crummy.
So she's happy now. They're happy. Yay. So they have gotten back from London.
So now the next chapter is just called St. Moritz and Honolulu. One thing about them, they're always in a fancy hotel.
Their sleep schedule is already fucked up. So they decide, let's go to, what is it, Sweden?
No, Switzerland. I don't know why they're going to Switzerland, but he's like, the baby could be in ski school. And she goes, he can't be in ski school. He's not even potty trained. And he goes,
he's a baby.
He goes, well, ask the nanny. And she goes, but it's Christmas. He goes, so? Does the nanny have family? The answer is no. The nanny comes. She watches the baby while they like romantically ski.
Well, he says, we'll do this Switzerland thing and then we'll stop back in New York and then we'll go to Hawaii. Everyone's dream.
And then something terrible happens. They have to spend the night in Milan because their flight was delayed. Just when you think money can solve everything, but sometimes you have to add a night.
Sometimes you have to just be in Milan. And he goes, well, why don't you get us a great dinner reservation? And so now they're going to have a lovely dinner in Milan.
And she goes, I'm so lucky. Like, look how amazing my life is that this giant inconvenience, a stopover in Milan between St. Moritz and Honolulu, is actually an opportunity for a sexy date night with my sexy, cool husband. So he's taking the baby to the pool to tire him out. She's getting dressed in the hotel. And what should pop open but a text message on his iPad that is not attached to his cell phone. Ladies, you know how sometimes just a text message goes to the iPad and not their cell phone deliberately?
Yeah, ladies, you know how when you have already in this book talked about having a habit of every time your boyfriend takes a shower, you go through all of his messages and all of his DMs, but here something is just popping up. You weren't even looking for it, it just popped up.
Call me baby. And then immediately after, are you home? And then immediately after that, I need to see you before you go to Hawaii.
So she goes, okay, so this is a person who knows about our travel plans. So she goes into the messages. There has been a long flirtation.
And there's clearly some texts that have been deleted. There's texts that quite literally say, delete this baby.
Imagine deleting the text, but not the delete this baby. So she screenshots everything, airdrops it to herself, and then deletes it off the iPad so that she has proof of everything. And then she starts journaling and writing down every instance she's ever forced herself to not comment on. Like every time she's seen him at a party, put his arm on a girl.
This wasn't the marriage I signed up for when I married Tom. Or I take that back. Maybe it was, but that felt like eons ago. Another epoch, too hard to judge in retrospect. I'd been committed to therapy and antidepressants. I'd been trying as hard as possible to fix all the cracks in the foundation of my mental health, to clean up my side of the street and be the architect of my own home, building it to be as strong and solid as could be so that Tom and Guy could inhabit it with me. This work hadn't been easy, but I'd stuck with it. Meanwhile, Tom had leaned into old ways, all the while telling me he was on my team. At that moment, it felt bizarrely clear what I wanted to hear and how to get there, as if the synapses in my brain were firing up a yellow brick road pointing in one direction: immediate divorce. I suddenly saw a future for myself where I was fucking free.
And that's beautiful. And I had hope. Not to foreshadow.
They're on the plane to Hawaii and he's like thinking or something. And she looks over at him and goes, thinking about a text to send your girlfriend? I'm a witch. I can read your brain. Because she doesn't want to admit she's been reading his texts.
Yeah. And so then he's freaking out and he's like, oh my God, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. And she goes, I am going to go switch seats with Guy. And then in Hawaii, I'll be nice to you because they're in Hawaii with friends. And then when we get back to New York, it's fucking over, bitch.
So they land and he like puts his hand on her shoulder and is like, can I get your bags? And she goes, do not touch me. He says, are you going to do this the whole time? I'm worried if you treat me with this sort of disdain, we will never be able to recover. This is when I was like, Tom, I like you. I mean, you can't, incredible work, Tom. Here's your like super depressed postpartum wife with your child in Honolulu. She's caught your ass cheating to be like,
are you really going to act this way?
To have that kind of, he's like, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. Your tone is upsetting to me. It shows you don't respect God.
Imagine being like, with that tone, you're going to ruin things.
Sarah, you don't even know the whole story. I don't know what you saw, but I don't have a girlfriend.
Oh.
Sometimes people flirt, you know? So yeah, I said some things back and I don't know what you saw, but I imagine it was the text about if she thought I was hot, but that one was just me being stupid, needing attention. I love you. I love Guy. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't even want one. I only want you.
I'll kick your ass.
She says, you really are an idiot. I saw a lot, but I didn't see that. Way to dig your hole even deeper.
Who has the time to lead a double life? Who even wants something other than a happy family, especially one where a baby was involved? They have this trip in Hawaii. She's trying to like play it cool with their friends. I'm sure their friends are like, what the fuck?
She's like being really cold to him in the room, but in public, she's like, let's split an appetizer.
Except for when her and her friend take mushrooms.
Yeah.
And Tom comes over to be like, hey, you guys ready for dinner? And she goes, the devil is in your eyes. You are the devil. The devil is in your eyeballs. And her friends are like, ha ha ha. And she goes, no, that's a devil in his eyes.
The next morning, the other father's like playing with his own son. And she's like, wow, must be nice to have a father who plays with the son. And everyone's like, yeah, it is.
Can I see her exact quote?
Sure.
The red devil lives in his stupid eyes.
I'm sure they didn't pick up on that.
No.
It wasn't that my husband had loved another or had an affair exactly. It was that he had not loved me enough to take care of me properly. He had loved me, but given his time and attention to a series of anonymous third parties simply for the novelty and excitement and ego stroke of them not being me.
And the thing is, Sierra, the friend that she's with, and Bill, like Sierra is making a lot of comments about how like the man child, like, oh, look at our 4 boys out there splashing around, 4 babies. A lot of women are playing into the trope of like you're raising your baby and your husband, and that's what they agreed to.
But the thing is, this other couple, it seems like the husband wakes up and takes the kid in the morning. Like,
exactly.
He is a much better father. Sarah's complaining about what a bad dad Tom is. She says, well, that's his damn problem. If he can't figure out how to experience the uncontaminated happiness of his own child, he doesn't deserve to know the magic. You can't fix him, and I do not recommend wasting your time trying. I've been there. We've all been there. You have to do you.
So they get back to New York, and she kicks Tom out. She's like, you can't stay here anymore.
And he is absolutely maintaining that he never even cheated on her ever in their relationship ever. He says it was just texts. It was just flirting. One of the texts are like him saying, you're my Angelina Jolie. What happened famously with Brad and Angelina? Did they just text? I can't recall.
I don't know, man. I don't even know what to say. I feel torn because I obviously don't think it was just texts.
Yeah, but that's like not even the problem here.
But I still think that even if it was just those texts, that is like a fireable offense. Like, I get that people want to be like, what? He never touched someone else. And I'm like, okay, what are bodies? You know what I mean? It's the compulsion to tell someone that they're your baby.
Mm-hmm. It's the idea that like you had some girl that knew you were going to Hawaii with your wife, so you'd have to hang out first.
Yeah.
I'd be like, don't fucking tell them our family Christmas plans.
It's the idea that you're texting someone, hey, sexy.
And have been this whole time.
The whole time. It's so fucked up. I can't believe this
crazy.
Motherfucker.
I will say one of the crazy things about this book is that she has agreed to this lie with him. And I don't know if they believe it privately, but publicly they're putting up this united front of, but he never even cheated. And I'm like, yeah, right. We're not stupid.
What is
I don't know if you believe it or not, but we don't believe it.
I am but a vessel. And all you can do.
And my soul is Angelina Jolie.
Like the way that in our society, like the tell the bees American cheating of it all. You know what I mean? People are like, well, they just kissed. Well, they just this. Well, they just that. Like, okay, But what was the vibe? Because this vibe feels like 10 years of emotional infidelity and like 10 years of an absolute lack of respect.
So she gets home. She tells Tom he's not allowed back. He like goes somewhere. She doesn't know where.
Then Sharon quits. Sharon's like, this is not a baby. This is a toddler. I'm a baby nurse.
And for the first time, she's like freaked out, but she's really coming into herself. She starts having mornings with the baby alone and she's like really enjoying it.
She also has a nanny.
I guess she just doesn't have live-in help for the first time.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so cool. Can I say, I am like desperate to know, when did Sharon get off? But I guess she was like the night nurse.
Like Sharon lives there.
Yeah, but does Sharon not ever get a break? For a year, she didn't get a break once?
I think there was another.
You think there was like a nanny and then Sharon was like the night nurse, live-in nanny?
Yeah, because sometimes they say the nanny and sometimes they say Sharon. And I don't think they're calling Sharon the nanny.
There is this like crazy help wanted ad from Tom Sachs and Sarah Hoover from a few years ago where they were looking for an executive assistant. And I will say in it, they're like, you will be managing a house with multiple staff, including like, it's like chef, multiple nannies, dog walkers, other assistants. It's crazy.
I cannot believe how much off-brand McDonald's ads pay.
Nice work if you can get it.
I can't wait to hear your mom talk about his art because at one point in this book, she's talking about going to his studio for the first time and seeing a surfboard with the Chanel logo on it. And she's like, this is from before luxury brands were branding objects. And I'm like, oh yeah. So what he was doing was subversive.
Good art. You know what they say, you're really subverting expectations when the very people who are buying Chanel are then buying your subversion of the Chanel logo. You've really upended something. You've really changed people's way of thinking.
My mind is boggled.
My mind is blown.
You know when the worst person in the world sees your art and says, this is what I've been thinking.
This makes perfect sense to me. So then she's like taking a writing class. She's going for runs. She kind of really comes into herself and she's like, you know what? I'm happy.
And so then she goes to brunch with her gals, Petunia and Augusta. And they are like, so how are things? Let's goss. Let's shoot the shit. Anyway, in case you were wondering, I ran into Tom at the CVS and she was like, oh, buying condoms for his girlfriend. And it's like, I don't think Tom uses condoms. Anyway. And she's like, no, Sarah, he's so sad. He's so depressed. He started sobbing when he saw me. He's just like eating beef jerky for dinner. It was so depressing.
I took a deep breath. Do you know how many times he's made me cry, Pete? Do you guys have any ideas? I haven't even told you half of it, but you would have told me to leave him years ago if I had. I looked at them to see if they had an inkling of what I was going to say next.
I was afraid if I left him, I'd never find someone else, that I wasn't good enough to ever find anyone else, and that I'd always be alone, or I'd have to move back to Indiana. I was afraid that this was the best it could ever get for me. And you know what? I refuse to continue like that anymore.
And you know what they say to her? They're like, okay, we hear you, but we think you're wrong. Give him another chance.
They go, that's the father of your child. Give him another chance for Guy.
They said most men need some kind of training. I've done it. Half the married women you know have done it. We found ways to make our husbands see the world through a woman's eyes.
She goes, I cannot continue to be in a relationship that makes me feel bad about myself.
And they say, but have you considered like how bad you made him feel? You were a tyrant. You were off your rocker. You acted like every single thing that went wrong in your life, every mile of inconvenience was organized purposely to fuck with you. You cried more than once about being stuck in traffic at rush hour going crosstown.
Tom is annoying, Petunia continued. He's flawed. He's done dumb things, and they aren't necessarily forgivable. He's a messy human, like any human is. To be fair, your communication skills and your troubleshooting strategy have not made it easy for anyone. I would suggest that some of what you hate about him was invented by whatever the fuck crazy shit was bouncing around in your brain.
Let me tell you, my brain is stable as hell right now, and I hate this man so much.
If we could get Petunia's identity on the horn.
But can I say, like, it makes sense to me that these are her friends because her values are, above all else, like, maintain a relationship with a man that gives you cultural clout. And, like, obviously, she found friends that agree with those values. So they're like, no, stay in this terrible marriage.
I know.
You and I would never give each other that advice. And that's why we're in goddamn East Bushwick or whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
I know.
That's why I don't have any tailored Chanel in my closet. That's why I have nothing but a fucking husband who sees me as an equal and a loser career. And I can't get a photo of myself in Vogue. And it's a mistake I made, honestly. If I could go back in time, I would have changed it. I would have found more climby people and I could have been at the top, miserable and alone, but up there with a lot of jewelry and a surfboard.
Unfortunately, not true, because you have been in concert with those people and chosen to never speak to them again.
And I regret that. I regret that every day.
And
I literally was just looking at Vogue weddings and there's a girl in it. And I said, oh my God, my ex cheated on me with her. And just saying, It could have been my Vogue wedding.
That's so true.
And I just would have had to be cheated on.
I
but
guess,
who cares?
can I say, I agree 100% with what you're saying, that you are the company you keep. Like, this is what she picked. But I also feel that, like, where is the sense of, like, for this night only, let's get wine drunk and talk shit about our husbands, and then tomorrow we'll, like, be reasonable.
Ashley, they saw a man cry. You don't think they should stop everything? He's already cried. What more do you want from the man? What more do you want? He cried, Ashley, and he had beef jerky sticks in CVS. You think he hasn't suffered enough?
Some people love beef jerky sticks.
My hot take is they were right. She should have gotten back together with him, because I'm like, that is what she wants.
It is what she wants.
What she wants is to be in a relationship with him, and hopefully it's a little bit better, and he's willing to make it a little bit better. And so she has what she wants.
And what she wants makes me so sad.
I would not recommend it to you.
I know.
And that's why you also don't have any tailored Chanel. That's why you've never been to an art fair once.
I've been to an art fair. You think the Port Clinton Art Fair in Highland Park, Illinois is not an art fair?
My bad.
You sound like a fucking idiot.
I am an idiot.
Unfortunately, she asks some valid questions. Why hadn't my husband noticed the depth of my suffering and tried to get me help? Well, luckily we're moving past that.
That was their new couples therapist. So basically she calls him on the way home from this pizza dinner, and she's like, you know what? They've convinced me to give you a chance. And he says, I'll do anything, please. I'll go to therapy. What if I take you on a 3-day vacation? I'll plan everything. So they go to Cuba for 3 days.
He plans everything. She's like, it was amazing. One time we went on a vacation to New Orleans, and he just, like, handed me a stack of printed out emails being like, this is what my friends recommended for dinner. And for Cuba, he's made reservations. As much as I always wanted Tom to be a dream husband, a potential I saw within him, I also really wanted to unlearn a lot of the cultural conditioning that had led me to allow his behaviors to go unchecked, to tolerate the daily grievances for the sake of keeping the marriage intact, as so many women around me had done. You're right. He sucks because you made him that way.
And then he's like, well, what do I have to do to win you back? And she says, here's my deal. I want to be selfish right now. I deserve to be my own focus. Your emotions can't be my burden. You can't ask me to listen to your problems or to help you brainstorm. I don't want to be a muse or a nurse or a therapist. I want to spend that energy on myself. And don't plan on spending time with anyone or at any party where I don't really, really want to be. I won't be making sure your clothes are clean. I won't check that we have coffee because I don't even drink coffee. Don't ask me what's for dinner. Get your own medicine when you have a cold. I deserve this, he said. I said I'd do anything to win you back, and I will absolutely do all of this. I'm grateful for the chance to grow and do better. It will be my privilege to do so, I swear. Not only that, but I think you should fold this into your own work. Write about me and about this and about us if you want. I believe in you as an artist, and while I'm ashamed of what happened, you are your own story. This is what artists do. They tell their truth, and sometimes it's at the expense of their own pride and the egos of other people. I love you no matter what, and I'm unfazed by your demands.
So she had told him that she's thinking about trying to write more professionally. And he's like, yes, I always believed you were an artist. You just needed to find your medium. And then thus we have the book.
April 2021. It turns out she's pregnant again. She's so excited. She calls Tom. He's so excited. They feel like they have this second opportunity to do it again. They're so happy with their son. They can't wait to grow their family. She's overjoyed. She says, okay, let's not tell anybody. I want to go to LA for a couple of weeks. And then when we come back, I'll be at like the 10-week mark. And then we can tell our son. He comes home. She's made him dinner. They're going to be the family. And
he's like, my parents are so excited.
She goes, I told you not to tell anybody. He goes, it's just my parents. She goes, it's not your news to tell. She's like, I'm going to LA. And he goes, okay, I'll meet you at the end of the week. And as she starts to go, she's on the plane and she gets a call from her new OBGYN who's like, by the way, you're having a miscarriage. I'm really sorry. So she gets to LA. She calls her mom. Her mom's like, I'm getting on the next flight out of here. I'm going to come be with you. And she calls Tom, and Tom's like, do you need me there? And she's like, I'm okay. Don't come. Don't worry about it. I don't need you. Thanks for offering, though. That's all it took. It was a little offer.
It's not all it took.
The next day, her mom's like, oh, there's no flights for 4 days. And she's like, really? And she's like, well, none that like don't conflict with my schedule, but I'll be there in 4 days. And she's bleeding. It's a lot of blood. It's difficult. Tom's checking in. He's like, if you wanted me, I would come. And she's like, don't come, don't come. Her mom goes, by the way, I'm here. And she's like, you are? I don't see you. She goes, well, I am going to a different hotel. I'd rather not stay at your hotel. I'll see you though.
We'll do lunch. We'll do lunch. And her mom comes and goes like, you know what? I have another call to take. Let's do dinner.
So she's alone having her miscarriage. Tom on the phone is like, your mom, huh? What a trip. And she's like, yep.
And she like knows now what she needs from a doctor, what she like, how she wants to experience her next pregnancy. And she talks about like coming to terms with her experience. My problems had been mostly avoidable, which is what bothers me the most. I could have prevented a lot of my suffering if I'd been in therapy, had earlier access to medication, and had an OBGYN who practiced trauma-informed care. I kind of wish she would give herself more grace because she did experience something horrible. And it's so hard to be like, but if I'd known sooner, I could have been different. I don't know, man. What if?
The forgiveness I craved from my mother had to equal the forgiveness I was willing to give her. And I hoped that one day I could expect the same grace from Guy. There might be a time when he'd think he hated me, filled with teenage angst or resentment I couldn't foresee, and I could only pray that one day he'd understand what I'd gone through and would appreciate my limits.
I'd felt unparented in my life, but it wasn't because I wasn't parentable. I'd felt unloved in my life, but it wasn't because I was unlovable. Tom calls and she says, I can't believe we got to a place where I was excited for him to be calling me.
You'll never be by your side, but
he'll call. Now I was glad to say I saw all men, all people as unique entities capable of their own special brands of shitty and loving behaviors. This is the thing, is I feel like she offers so much forgiveness to her mom and Tom, who it seems have not changed in the slightest. And so she's decided like, okay, this is who they are and I have to meet them where they are. But it seems that no one sees who she is and is able to meet her where she is, literally or emotionally. She is at the Chateau Marmont miscarrying alone. Her mom is 2 blocks away at the Tower Hotel, and Tom is still in New York. It's so stressful to read this final chapter where I thought she'd come to all of these like powerful realizations. Like we talk a lot about who's a genius artist, and like you read Monsters
by Claire Detterer,
about how we view men as these like untamable geniuses.
Yeah, so in this book, Monsters, she's like kind of examining geniuses and what we do with their art when they've like done something terrible. And she kind of comes to this conclusion that actually in our society, we almost think you have to be terrible to be seen as a genius, that there's this idea that you're so divinely interpreted, or like you're interpreting something so divine that you can't be held to like our human expectations. And to be an artist is to be so deeply selfish that like your passion and dedication to your art is like the most selfish thing you can pursue. But like, because you're a genius, you're allowed to be that selfish. So then she compares it to motherhood, which is like the most selfless thing you can do in terms of you have to give almost all of yourself to this other being to keep them alive. And so then like the question is asked, can a mother be an artist? If like to be an artist is to be completely selfish, and then to be a mother is to be completely selfless. And of course, like men don't even have to deal with this.
Yeah. And I haven't read the book, but I do think that idea is interesting in that I think this book was very well written, and she like came into herself as a creative through being a mother. Like she never would have developed a single boundary in her relationship or like found any true sense of self had she not like, and I'm not saying you have to be a mother to find, I'm saying in her experience, it seems that she was never going to like dig deep and figure out where her self is if she hadn't become a mother. And so I thought that was very fascinating and very interesting. And then we have her here in LA alone again.
Yeah.
And she's talking about it like it's completely different.
I do think they ended up having another child.
Yep.
I think they're still together to this day.
Yep.
I don't know. I think at its best, it's still not a relationship that either of us is looking for. It's still not like a value system that either of us necessarily subscribe to.
No, it isn't.
But she loves her son now.
That's so good.
And she feels so lucky to be his mom.
That's really also good. I felt very like happy for her relationship with her son. Interested and impressed by this book. Hatred for her relationship with Tom. Hatred for her relationship with her mother. And interested in her relationship with herself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like it plays precariously on that balance of course, this is like a deeply privileged, glamorous experience. Like, you know what I mean? To be crying at the Chateau Marmont. She both knows that in a self-aware way, not in a way that she's going to change her behavior because she's aware of it, but she's writing with self-awareness that maybe she doesn't live with. And on top of that, I think she also seems to be aware that that's kind of what makes this book more interesting than the typical motherhood story. Like, you know what I mean? Sex sells. And that mentality, this idea that like, this is so many women's experience. This is like a deeply common experience. Motherhood, postpartum, it's so hard. No matter how much money you have, no matter where you are, like it is a struggle for everyone physically, emotionally, mentally. I guess not those like 18 kids and counting people. They seem to breeze through it. But besides for them, it seems like this is like this universally difficult thing. And so she's kind of wrapping up this tough story in the trappings of what is so glamorous and like compelling in page Churney and page 6, which is that she is part of this sexy, cool New York world. So I do think she like weaponizes it for good. I don't think it's just a name drop story to brag. I think it's specifically like that's her advantage is she's like, come for the story of what it's really like, come for the gossip of this super rich New York City Soho art woman. Stay for the universal truths that motherhood is hard.
It made me feel equally compassionate for mothers and also craving of a really good martini.
Yeah. Oh, God, does she make a martini sound good? I don't even like them, but I might get one now.
Ooh.
Well, how many worm-tinis would you have with her?
That's the thing is I'd like some worm-tinis, but I'd like to have them separate. I really don't want to know her. I feel like everything that I need to know I got from this book, and not even in a bad way, but in a way where I'm like, why?
Anyway, who do we love the most? Who's the king of our castle?
We love the 5-star reviewing wormies.